across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and a very big welcome to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. Apologies for disappearing off mid last week with whatever the horrific latest bug and lurgy was going around the office and around London. But actually, I've knocked out a few of my colleagues as well. So apologies for that. A few of the back behind the scenes guys as well. So Ted, if you're listening, hope you're feeling better. Hope you'll be back at work soon as well. But it's great to be back on air. Such an important day to be back on air. Lots to talk about. I cannot wait to hear your thoughts on what we're going to be asking you today. Do get in touch with us. You know the number. I'll read it to you in a couple of moments. But whether you're watching on YouTube or your connected device, listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, I so appreciate your company today. And don't forget, if you do miss anything, go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit the subscribe. You never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, of course, our main topic today will be the 15 people now confirmed dead after 2 gunmen carried out a deadly anti-Semitic attack on a Hanukkah celebration on Sydney's Bondi Beach. The father and son assailants, extraordinary family activity for this family, opened fire on Jewish families gathered at the world-famous beach in Australia's deadliest terrorist atrocity. Among the victims was a British-born rabbi, father of 5, a Holocaust survivor, and also a 10-year-old girl. 30 victims still remain in hospital, 5 in critical conditions. So there are fears that death toll could rise. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has condemned the shooting as cold-blooded murder. He said he'd previously warned the Australian government that support for a Palestinian state would fuel anti-Semitism. And oh, what a surprise, it has. Not just in Australia, but in the UK as well. Meanwhile, back in the UK, thousands of protesters took to the streets of the East Sussex town of Crowborough once again yesterday for the 6th Sunday in a row, angered by plans to house hundreds and hundreds of migrant men in a former army barracks just a 20-minute walk from the main town. And ministers are facing a mounting backlash over plans to define Islamophobia in law, as critics warn the move could threaten free speech and silence legitimate debate. So much more to talk about, including warnings from the military chief, Air Chief Marshal Sir Richard Knighton, that is basically, we need to prepare for war. And that doesn't mean just the government and some spending on military. It means all of us as well. The small matter of a possible coup against Keir Starmer. I mean, but that's, that's just news in brief down the bottom of the page now, isn't it? On a day like yesterday, and we're talking about it today. But I want to hear your thoughts. The question I've got to ask you today is, what do Western governments, not just Australia, not just the UK, or France or Germany or everyone else, what do they need to do to prevent more terror attacks like the Bondi Beach Hanukkah massacre from happening? Really simple question. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with me on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at national rate. Text cost 1, standard network rate message. Because what really struck me about the Bondi Beach attack was, first of all, yesterday, the BBC, for a good couple of hours, by the way, not actually feeling any need to mention the fact that everyone was very, very, very clear that it was not people on Bondi Beach or in the park next to Bondi Beach who had been killed. It was Jewish people. How did we know they were Jewish? Because they were people being targeted because they were at a Hanukkah festival. Publicly advertised, an event that takes place every year. The gunmen knew this. That's why they were there. The footage of the gunmen raising clear questions about likely motivations very early on. As it was, we now know that ISIS flags were found in the car, which they'd also put an IED in nearby as they took their guns and basically deliberately shot at as many Jewish people, young and old, children and adults, as they could. The gunman father is thankfully dead. Good riddance. His son, Naveed Akram, is critically ill in hospital, but certainly with survivable injuries, so he will face, hopefully, a lifetime behind bars. But it turns out that the guns they were using were legally available. the licence had been given for 6 guns to the father. So guess what the solution to that terror attack yesterday is from Anthony Albanese, the Australian Prime Minister? Tougher gun laws. Yeah, that's the answer. In the same way that here I am in my studio just above London Bridge, where twice now we've had terror attacks, and one involving, in Westminster as well, people driving along and killing people on London Bridge and on Westminster Bridge and other places. Same with the Christmas markets around the country and in Germany. The solution is bollards. We call them peace bollards, somewhat ironically, because apparently they're there to keep us safe. It's like the IRA. The problem with the IRA was they put bombs into waste bins in train stations. So we took the waste bins away, and then we had litter everywhere, and then we still had bombs. They just didn't put them in litter bins anymore. This is the thing. You can put up the bollards, you can make it harder to get hold of guns, you can do whatever you want. They will find a way. Why? Because this wasn't a senseless killing. This wasn't, as we often hear, a senseless killing of innocents. Who knows what the motivation might be? This wasn't cowardly attack. No. This was a very deliberate, absolutely with sense attack on Jewish people. Why? Because this father and son were motivated by Islamist ideology. Not because they are Muslim, but because they are Muslims motivated by Islamist ideology. They are a subset, a group of Muslims. Sadly in the West, a minority, but not a small enough minority that we can say, oh, well, never mind, don't worry about that. Because only yesterday we had a terror attack on a Christmas market, foiled in Germany. So we didn't get to see the footage of the maimed children and the bodies lying on the street in Germany because they managed to foil that one. They foil attacks in central London and elsewhere all the time. They weren't able to foil the attack just 2 months ago on the Manchester Heaton Park synagogue. They weren't able to do that, were they? But they don't get them every time. But here's the thing. The solution isn't tougher gun laws. The solution isn't putting bollards in. The solution isn't new definitions of Islamophobia. The solution isn't everyone just staying quiet and not talking about it because, diversity is our strength, community cohesion, blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah. Enough is enough. You may not be Jewish. Majority of our country is not Jewish. Majority of Australians are not Jewish. But it never ends with the Jews. When people march on our streets, when they march through the Middle East, and when they march on our streets in London, in Manchester, in Liverpool, when they march on the streets in Sydney, in Australia, and they shout, globalise the intifada, what did you think it meant? It means kill Jews worldwide. That's what it means. And when it starts with the Jews, as a very wise man once said, it never ends with the Jews, and it won't end with the Jews, because this political Islamist ideology isn't just about pro-Palestine. It is about killing every Jew on the planet and then killing everybody who will not convert to their form of political Islamist ideology as well. So you, me, everyone is next, including, by the way, so-called moderate Muslims as well. So everyone needs to wake up, smell the coffee and realise that we need to take action, and the time is now. Otherwise, we're going to be waking up, whether it's next week, next month, next year, to our own Bondi Beach massacre. It is a miracle that only 2 people died at the Manchester synagogue. A miracle. It could have been far more. And it may be far more next time. So, my question to you. What do Western governments need to do to prevent more terror attacks like the Bondi Beach Hanukkah massacre from happening? Because the answer, I think, is rather more, shall we say, extreme than many people would like to think. Tell me what you think. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Sam Armstrong would like to say is joining me today. Commentator Sam Armstrong. You never pull your punches. Let's have a reality check. We need to act, and we need to act now.
There are common denominators in any pattern of events. And let me tell you what is not a common denominator in recent terrorist attacks. It's not the weapons they use. Islamist terrorist attackers have used knives, they've used bombs, they've used vehicles, and now they've used guns as well. These are people that will use whatever they can get their hands on, as you say. So the idea that you can deal with this problem by going after weapons of any variety is for the birds. There is one common denominator and one common denominator alone. These are largely men who believe in a bizarre, dangerous, backwards idea by which they believe that their religious ideals can be imposed, including by force, on millions of people, some of whom think that Muhammad's claims to be a prophet of God or anything but a revelation, and they believe that they can impose that lifestyle on us all, and they believe it is their duty to do so. Until we deal with that, we will never get anywhere. There is another problem, and I'm going to speak carefully, but I mean this. I think, in a sense, this is a microcosm of the troubles with mass migration. Ahmed al-Ahmed was a relatively recent refugee from Syria, and he was a hero. He charged towards a gunman and disarmed him. He is precisely the kind of person I would love to live next door to. He is the best of all of us.
And he went in knowing that he would die.
That's right.
He said that to his friend.
However, when you import millions of people from difficult countries, to put it mildly, you are going to get a range of people. And amongst the people that came in masse into Australia was Sajid Akram. And Australia not only obviously failed to perform basic checks on him, but they gave him a licence to own 6 firearms, 6 firearms, and like many people, he had a family here in Australia, and like in many cases, second-generation migrants, despite being citizens of their country, end up being more radical than their parents. That is a well-known, observable phenomenon. And my position is very clear. We have had quite a lot of migration in this country, and I don't want to go back and reinvent the wheel that much or relitigate that. But in future, we know now with a very good data set, when you import people en masse from the third world, yes, you get some good people, but you get some people that think a good Sunday afternoon activity is to go down to a beach and shoot at Jews. And when our politicians are making decisions about our future immigration policy, about who they let in and who they don't, and how careful the checks are on those who are let in, you would dare think that maybe, rather than talking some nonsense about capping the number of guns you need to own in Australia for everyone, that they would think about, maybe it's not a good idea to import all of these people when some of them we know wish to kill people on our streets.
You're playing the odds. You're playing the odds. And in the same way, I liken this to being a nightclub bouncer. A bunch of 10 lads turn up. Are you going to let the 10 lads in on their own? No. If you've got women with you, then we'll let you in, because we know a bunch of 10 lads are likely to be a problem later on. You probably not. You might not be, but the odds are too high, so we don't let in groups of 10 lads. It's that simple. I don't. You're not wearing your football shirt in the pub on match day, because in some pubs, because they don't want trouble. Not everybody's going to cause the trouble, but they play the odds. I don't understand why we don't play the odds better when it comes to our immigration policy. I would say, genuinely, that I think there are certain countries now we should say, thank you, I'm with Trump on this one, thank you, no more, we're done now. We're done. You're only entering in exceptional circumstances. I'm also of the view that anyone who's on a watch list, this son, Naveed Akram, he wasn't the licensed gun owner. He was born in Australia, but he was investigated some 6 years ago over ties to ISIS. Here's the thing. I mean, OK, he's an Australian citizen. They can't get rid of him. Fair enough. I get that. However, we have so many people on our watch list here in the UK. Some 3,000 are being watched constantly. We've got 40,000 at least who they are worried about. Virtually every single time we have a terror attack in this country, as you say, it is nearly always either someone who's come from abroad or the child of someone who's come from abroad, first generation. In fact, they're more likely to be, as you say, first generation. That is a very clear, absolutely statistical phenomenon. And a lot of them are dual nationals. I'm of the view, they nearly always have been flagged up and then decided they're not a risk. Seems to me that if people have been flagged up and they're considered a bit of a risk, and they are dual nationals or not British nationals, I say bye-bye. Thank you for coming. We no longer wish you to be here. I think the benefit of the doubt has to go to the safety of the British people, or in the case of Australia, the safety of the Australian people, rather than someone's right to live wherever the hell they want to in the world. I think the British people have had enough. We are going to have a terror attack of this magnitude at some point. It's not a case of if, it is a case of when. And when that happens, we're going to have the same politicians with the same platitudes who've also been spouting their nonsense about genocide in Gaza, recognising a Palestinian state, or like the Home Secretary attending a pro-Palestinian march, marching under the Palestinian flag, for goodness sake, in the wake of October the 7th, for goodness sake. And they're all going to be surprised. Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, I am shocked by what happened in Australia. As I tweeted her, why are you shocked? I'm not shocked. I'm never shocked by terror attacks. I also don't give thoughts or prayers. I don't like candles. I don't want any of that. I haven't looked back in anger since the Manchester Arena. I'm done. Full stop, done. I'm with Morrissey on this one. I absolutely look back in anger, and I look forward in anger at my politicians for not doing what they should be doing, which is protecting us from these people. There are too many people in our midst who wish us ill. And people thinking again, oh, it's the Jews, not just the Jews, but it's the Jews, it's not my problem, I'm not Jewish. Don't worry, when they finish with the Jews, they'll come for everybody else. That is part of the political ideology of Islamist extremism. It is. They say the quiet bit out loud. Globalise the Intifada. They say the quiet bit out loud. They have people marching on our streets saying it. But this stuff is imbued in our political class, our civil service, teachers at schools, the universities, the NHS, all our political parties. This stuff is, I mean, good God, it's in our media. BBC, Sky, ITV are literally, in Channel 4, saturated in this thought process. We are totally surrounded by this, and we need to root it out.
Yeah, and I'll tell you who we can start rooting it out with, and I tell you because it's emblematic of how far the rot is. The Sydney Morning Herald newspaper in Australia have tracked down the wife of Sajid Akram and the mother of Naveed Akram, a man who's shot at a 10-year-old girl. Shot at a 10-year-old girl. This is what his mother has to say about him. She says, he doesn't go out, he doesn't mix around with friends, he doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he doesn't go to bad places, he goes to work, he comes home, he goes to exercise, and that's it. She says, anyone would wish to have a son like my son.
Yeah.
He's a good boy.
He's a good boy. I mean, he's not, sweetheart. We've just seen that.
Your son is a monster. You bred him, you raised him, and he, alongside your husband, has just committed one of the most appalling atrocities in your country's history. You should be hanging your head in shame. And the fact that after your son has done that you have not immediately renounced him, and immediately said what he has done is appalling, means that you, Verena Akram, are, in my view, unfit to live in a Western country.
You're part of the problem, certainly. I mean, do you know what I thought was really fascinating? You mentioned Ahmed El Ahmed, who was, a store owner, father of two, who had already been shot in the arm and in the hand. He had a bandage on when he tackled one of the gunmen. It looks like he tackled the father, Sajid Akram, and he managed, I mean, amazing. Tackled him from behind, unarmed, grabbed the gun. By all accounts, by the way, Australian police were on the scene at this point, which is a bit of a worry. Why were they not doing this and leaving it to a civilian? Because they were unarmed. Again, we're having some issues here. We're going to have to start, and this is an issue in England as well, I think a lot of people say.
Yeah, but Julia, just on that point, okay, we are now talking very seriously about the fact that we're having to end unarmed policing in this country that we've had forever because of mass migration and the consequence of problems of Islamist terrorism.
And that is the thing. Well, let me just play some of the footage. I mean, if you haven't seen it, I don't know where you've been for the last 24 hours, but Ahmed Ahmed tackling this this gunman and disabling him is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, just so brave. And he did shout to his friend, I might die, but I've got to do this. And he went in and he managed to get the gun off the man, and then within a few minutes, both men had been shot by the police. But it's fascinating. It's a Syrian refugee, a Muslim man. It's fascinating. I mean, I was tweeted, this guy's an absolute hero. The number of people who replied to me are the usual suspects going, oh, but you're gutted he's Muslim. Oh, look, he's Muslim. Like, OK, I couldn't care less whether he was atheist, Muslim, Catholic, Sikh, Jehovah's Witness. I don't care. It's totally irrelevant. He was a good man. People like me who are talking about the problem of Islamist ideology and terrorism don't have a problem with Muslims. Most people in this country don't have a problem with Muslims because people are not Islamophobic. People are not racist in this country. People have a problem with an ideology which some Muslims, too large a minority in this country, particularly younger men, follow, and that's our issue. So I'd be absolutely delighted whether this man had any religion at all or none. The point is that good people do good things and bad people do bad things. But let's try and identify who the bad people are a little bit sooner. Would that be a good idea? I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Oh, just one final thing we ought to mention. What the hell is going on at Downing Street? Keir Starmer yesterday, they had obviously one of those sort of scheduled tweets to go out, posts to go out for Hanukkah, the first day of this festival of light for the Jewish religion. And this message went out about 2 hours after the Bondi Beach attack had started, and it goes out, wishing everyone a happy Hanukkah. You know, just totally like someone allowed that scheduled message to go out, and then another one from 10 Downing Street's official account. And then sort of an hour later, the Prime Minister going, oh, this is terrible, what's happened? I mean, we have a whole load of people, we have a government that apparently doesn't work on a Sunday morning. There's a major terror attack in one of our closest allies. And no one has bothered to look at the news before they've allowed these messages to go out. I mean, this is not about the niceties of what someone said on social media. This is about the abject lack of basic competence and basic sort of knowledge that is going on in Number 10.
If you think that's bad, you wait till you see what they've got coming later this week. A new definition of Islamophobia, which is going to ban precisely the conversation that you and I have just had.
Well, we'll both be in prison then.
We will both be in prison.
Because I'm going to still have that conversation.
And, you know, you would think that the government may wish to take seriously the words of its own independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, who says that he is against such a definition. Why? Because it would threaten free speech and the work of the authorities in tackling Islamic terrorism. And our government, in the week after this, proposes to roll it out, notwithstanding.
Of course they do. I wonder what their concern is about that, but there we are. 10:24 is the time. I want to hear from you. Get your calls in. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. What do Western governments, like British government, like the Australians, Germans, French, Canadian, you name it, what do they need to do to prevent more terror attacks like the Bondi Beach Hanukkah massacre from happening? Because I think it's pretty simple. I don't think they're willing to do it. I'll tell you what it doesn't include: sodding candles and prayers. Number to call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:28 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls coming in thick and fast on what should the Western governments need to do to prevent more terror attacks like the Bondi Beach attack. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. Give us a call. Ashley's done just that. He's in London. Hi, Ashley.
Morning, Julia. Not much I can say. Look, I'm part of the Jewish community here, and we've felt beyond vulnerable in regards to what's going on, and it's no surprise. If I'm honest, it's. I think that everyone's been screaming out at governments all over the world that look, you're promoting, you're allowing. You're going on saying, oh, the words they're using, there's a nuance to it, and it doesn't. But they're actually, you know, the people are saying what they mean. And one of the problems that we have is the word racist, right? And what I mean by that is that we're allowing imams, speakers coming into this country from countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh that come over spewing this form of Islam. To people, speaking to schools, speaking to mosques, speaking to people, brainwashing these people with this information. We're allowing them into the country, and the government won't stop it because, you know, because they're saying, oh, it could be deemed as being racist. Well, do you know what? If you're called racist for stopping that sort of influence coming into our countries and changing our society to what their society is, then I'm sorry, if that's what they want to call us, then so be it.
Yeah,
right?
I think those, again, I think that word doesn't even have any meaning anymore because it's been thrown around so stupidly.
It doesn't. I mean, today I was going through a couple of things. I was going through my social media, and you've got people going, oh, great job by the Israelis over in Bondi, Hannibal directive.
This is the idea. The Mossad's behind the slaughter of Jews. Yeah.
Right. So what's happened since October the 7th is that these people who are influencing people are not just demonising us Jews, but they're actually putting the blame on us for everything that happens, but also they're trying to make comparables with things in the past, like the Holocaust. They're trying to make now the Holocaust doesn't mean anything anymore because actually all of this has happened. Look at this, the Jews. Right. So forget the fact half of our population were murdered. That doesn't matter. So this is all a strategic goal, and it's being played out openly, but the governments throughout the West are just sitting there and going, okay, they don't mean anything by it. And that's our frustration. You know, when you turn around and say, you look at the Middle East, I'm born and bred here, I love my country, right? And you can't be Jewish and you can't say that you support the state of Israel, but you don't necessarily always agree with the government. You can't, as a Jew, you know.
I mean, I'm British. I don't support most things the British government does, even when it's a government I voted for.
and so it's. I've never seen a situation where it's so turned on the head that actually the people that are being abused are then being accused of being the ones that are coordinating.
But it's the same with the Gaza, the genocide in Gaza. I mean, there's ample evidence there was nothing close to a genocide in Gaza, and ample evidence that what the Hamas wanted to do, they were attempting to do on October the 7th, was genocide of Jews. I mean, again, from globalise the Intifada means kill all Jews around the world. This is, I keep saying to her, what did you think it meant? Actually, I couldn't agree with you more, mate. And I'm just, again, I don't do vigils, I don't do lighting candles, but my heart goes out because I know so many people who are genuinely, in the Jewish community, genuinely very, very scared, and I understandably. But you know what? You've got enough British people who are non-Jews who are going to stand by you. We're not going to let this happen again. We are just not going to let this happen. Derek's on the line in Manchester. Hello, Derek.
Hello, Julia.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Good, my love. What do you want to say?
Well, what a horrible thing to start with. My heart goes out to everyone involved, everyone all the victims involved, obviously. The thing is, you're asking what we should do about it. And it's something that we should have done 20, 30 years ago, which is properly control immigration into this country. We have allowed virtually every war zone on every war on the planet. We've allowed both sides of each of these war zones to come here, and we've got them fighting on our streets. Not just the But obviously, the main one that does stand out, and the common denominator between all of it, is Islam, I'm afraid.
Well, you don't even need to say, no, you're on my show. You don't need to say, I'm afraid. We do facts.
Yeah, I do.
We do facts on this show.
I've been conditioned to that. From
You know all
being a
those
child,
Hindu
that I'm not
bombs and those
supposed to
Sikh
say the wrong
bombs.
things.
You know all
Exactly.
those terror attacks from the Jews. Do you remember?
Do you know all the far right wing extremists as well that that are constantly getting bandied about. Watch out for the far right. They're on MI5's watch list. I've never seen an attack from one of them yet. That's the thing. But as I say, the common denominator is Islam. But if you look to the Quran, and if we will look to some of the vicious verses, of which there are absolutely hundreds, you'll find that one that stands out particularly in my mind is do not take Jews and Christians as your friends, as they are the vilest of creatures. You'll see another one. When the holy months end, slay them wherever you find them. That's just too.
No, exactly. No. People get very uncomfortable about this. What is in the Quran? Again, there's never been a reformation like there has with Christianity. And Christianity did some very, very, very bad things to people of no faith or other faiths for many centuries. But there's never been a reference. There's never been a sort of a modernisation. And far too many people who are Muslims, the vast majority living in peace around the world. There are many Muslim countries, many people living here and in the Middle East and elsewhere, living a perfect normal life. There are far too many people who follow this extremist version of Islam. But to pretend it's not got a link to Islam is ridiculous. It is. It is a form of Islam.
There are probably more following it than you care to imagine.
That's the worry.
Certainly, than our government have cared to imagine, and they seem to have let most of them into this country because they've been kicked out of genuine Islamic countries where they won't put up or tolerate with it.
That's the interesting thing. Muslim Brotherhood operating with impunity in a lot of Western nations, but absolutely not in the Middle East, most of them. That's interesting. Derek, thank you for your call. I really appreciate that. 10:35 is the time. Up next, we're going to talk to Brendan O'Neill from Spiked Online to get his thoughts on what the West should do next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:37 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Well, someone we always get common sense from is my next guest, Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer at Spiked Online. Good morning to you, Brendan.
Hi, Julia. How you doing?
Very well. Thank you for joining us. I'm sorry you were speaking to you on such a horrific day, the morning after, the day before that horrific Hanukkah terror attack on Bondi Beach. Can I put to you the question that I'm putting to our audience today? What do Western governments need to do to prevent more terror attacks just like that massacre from happening? Because let's face it, an awful lot of us are saying, when does it happen here? We're only 2 months on from the Eden Park Synagogue attack. Thankfully, I mean, we have to be grateful that only 2 people died in that attack. It could have been dozens. How do we prevent it from happening here?
You know, that's the question everyone should be asking today, isn't it? And I think there are quite a few things we need to do. We need to get a handle on our borders because we are importing anti-Semites. There is no question about that whatsoever. We are bringing people in from countries that are very, very anti-Jewish. We need to get serious about anti-Semitism in our own society. We've seen a surge in it in Britain and in Australia over the past 2 years since Hamas's pogrom, the 7th of October. And we need to challenge Israelophobia. We can't just let this Israelophobic fashion run riot amongst the activist class and the media and the liberal establishment who think that hating Israel is not the same thing as hating Jews. But I'm sorry, none of us are buying that anymore. If you spend your every waking hour demonizing the world's only Jewish nation as the worst nation in the world, then you are going to stick a target sign on the Jewish people themselves. Everyone now sees that. If we're expected to think it's a coincidence that there has been a surge in attacks on Jews at exactly the same time there's been this surge in hatred for Israel, we're not buying it. So we've got to control immigration better, know who's coming into this country, clamp down on anti-Semitism and clamp down on Israelophobia, and we need to do it with urgency.
And this is the thing, we needed to do it, probably, as one of our guests say, so 20 years ago, 10 years ago, a couple of years ago. But this is not something like the anti-Semitism that we saw under Jeremy Corbyn on the hard left. That had been growing. I think it perhaps always been there for quite some time. We've had anti-Semitism on the far right as well. But the anti-Semitism which takes the form of being, they call it pro-Palestinianism, they call it concern for innocent children in Gaza. But by the way, more children will have died in Sudan in 1 week than died the entire 2.5-year war, almost, in Gaza. So, but no marches for those children. No one's interested. No Jews. No news. We know that. But this pretend sort of masked anti-Semitism in terms of anti-Zionism. This is mainstream now. This is things that the Prime Minister says and does in recognising a Palestinian state. This is something that the now Home Secretary stood there with a Palestinian flag. This is the norm at the BBC, Sky News, ITV, Channel 4 and elsewhere. This is mainstream now. How do you tackle it when it's no longer something that's just happening in a couple of dodgy mosques with some dodgy imported imams or far right or far left, but it's just mainstream society?
That's such an important question because that mainstreaming of so-called anti-Zionism is emboldening the worst anti-Semites, the kind of Islamist anti-Semites, the ones who are willing to carry out extreme forms of violence. There's no question in my mind that there is a relationship between these two things. There's a relationship between that supposedly respectable anti-Zionism and this murderous anti-Semitism. Yeah. In my mind, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. There is no difference between them now whatsoever.
Well, hold on a minute. I know plenty of Jewish people who aren't Zionists and are very critical of not just of Netanyahu's government in Israel, but most of Israel's actions. What would you say? They can't be anti-Semitic if they're Jewish. That's what people would say.
People say it's not anti-Semitic to criticize Israel. Obviously, that's the case. It's not racist to criticize a country. We should all be free to criticize countries. But we're not talking about criticism of Israel anymore. And we haven't been for quite a few years. We're talking about blind, bigoted hatred for Israel. Yeah. We're talking about people on our streets every weekend calling openly for the destruction of Israel from the river to the sea. We're talking about people depicting Israel as the most bloodthirsty nation on earth, a uniquely evil nation, a nation that loves to kill children. That's what they used to say about the Jews in the 1200s and the 1300s, by the way. We're talking about a venomous loathing for one state above all other states. Yeah. That is, they call it anti-Zionism. To my mind, it's anti-Semitism.
Because it's coincidentally the only Jewish state in the world, the only Jewish state in the Middle East. You talked about we need to challenge Israelophobia. We need to challenge, tackle our borders. Okay, talking to the borders, what does that actually mean? Because the reality is we have imported a lot of people to this country, and as Sam Armstrong was saying, we've imported a lot of people to this country from, third world countries, basket case countries, where they're war-torn, they don't share our values, and they are coming here imbued, either they are first generation or their children. We see this increasingly second generation who feel like for some way they don't fit in. They are turning to this extremist Islamist ideology, which an awful lot of the Middle East is trying to clamp down on. We apparently are saying, oh, multiculturalism, isn't it grand? Diversity is our strength. What are we going to do about that? We've got people who are here, already in this country, either first generation or born and bred Brits here, who hate not just Jews, they hate this country, Western values, democracy, Christians, infidels like me who are atheists. They hate us. They biding their time and want to kill us. And it's not 2 or 3 people. We know huge number of people, on the vast majority of people on the terror watch list are Islamist extremists. Some 3,000 people being watched, some 40,000 who are a concern. And the estimates, when you look at polling done by lefty organisations like Channel 4 over the years, suggesting in terms of even among so-called moderate Muslim views, that some of those views are not what most people would consider moderate views. What are you going to do about it?
There is such a catastrophic failure of integration, and admitting that is the very first step. I know that's the easy bit, but there's a lot of people who still won't even admit that.
Yeah.
There was a moment about 10 years ago during the ISIS wars in Syria and Iraq when there were more British Muslims in ISIS than there were in the British Army.
Yes.
And that should have been a wake-up call to this country. That should have been the moment at which we said, hold on, why are 600 or 700 young men and women leaving this country and joining a death cult that beheads homosexuals and murders women and throws Christians into pits of fire? What's going on here? But of course, we weren't allowed to have that discussion, because if anyone raised it, they were called Islamophobic. They were accused of being racist. They were accused of starting a culture war. The starting point has got to be an honest, frank discussion, which is that we currently have the worst of both worlds. We are bringing in unprecedented numbers of people from, let's be honest, regressive parts of the world at exactly the same time that we have abandoned the project of integration, because the people who run this country don't think it's a country worth integrating into. They think Britain is a horrible place with a racist history and lots of Islamophobes wandering around and gammon, etc. So it's this toxic combination of pretty much opening the borders to people from crazy parts of the world, while also actively discouraging them from integrating.
And denigrating the home culture, denigrating Western values. The number of young people who think democracy is a bad thing, who think that everything that Britain and the West has ever done is terrible. Well, yeah, isn't it weird how they don't want to emigrate to those countries, but people do want to emigrate to these? Okay, so you talk about we need to recognise the problem, we need to talk about the problem, yeah, okay. And then what do we do about it? Because I'm not entirely sure that's going to stop the next car bomb or the next truck attack or the next knifing or the next shooting.
There are some things that I think are quite straightforward, although if you watch this government, you'd think they aren't, but they actually are, which is firstly, stop the small boats, get a handle on our borders. We used to be the naval masters of the sea, and now we can't even stop a few small dinghies coming over from France. All the small boats should be stopped. Those young men should be turned away instantly or held and then deported. Anyone who came here illegally, in my view, should be sent back. You can't just come into a country illegally. That's not allowed.
And you mean including people who've been here 20 years?
I think it depends on what they've been doing in those 20 years. But I think there are lots of people who came here illegally who should be sent back. The far harder thing, Julia, of course, is exactly the problem you talk about, which is the failure of integration often expresses itself further down the generational line. So if you look at Irish immigrants, for example, my parents are those, they didn't integrate spectacularly well in the 1970s. There was a war going on, the Troubles, bombs going off, and people were a bit wary of Catholics, and the Irish kind of kept to themselves. They weren't very well integrated, but their children are. And their grandchildren are. There's a generational warming to the host country, if we might put it like that. That's not happened with sections of the Muslim community or the Pakistani Muslim community. And in fact, often their grandchildren, the third generation here, are more radical than their grandparents were when they came here, often to flee Islamic rule, often because they wanted to be part of a country like Britain. Now we have youngsters born in Britain who have these London accents, who are technically speaking more British than me, who go around with their faces covered saying they hate Jews and they want to destroy Britain. This is a catastrophic failure. The problem, of course, we can't just throw those people out of the country. So we've got to tackle this at a root level in terms of changing the education system, changing the political system, and making it clear to people if you're in Britain, you live by British rules. There is no other choice.
Brendan O'Neill, I could talk to you for hours about this. There is so much more to say about this. My goodness me, there's definitely a lot more to be done. Chief political writer at Spiked Online, thank you. Sam Armstrong, I mean, I think Brendan has absolutely tackled the beginning of what we need to do. But the reality is we don't have a political class that is willing to do any of that.
No, and it starts with one of the great lies about our society, which is that Britishness, insofar as people accept it even exists, is something of shame, and it's got that twin disease with that, which is all cultures are equal. Let me tell you, okay, all cultures are not equal, and the greatest culture in the history of humanity is British culture, right? It is the culture that was founded and created in this country through the Reformation, through Enlightenment, through all of the great 19th and 18th century thinkers that went on to birth the United States, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the wealthiest, healthiest countries in the history of humanity, the freest countries in the history of humanity. Our history is a source of immense pride, pride. And if you forget that, all of a sudden you think, oh, I know what would make it better. Let's import a load of people about which we know nothing from countries that have spent the last, frankly, 2 millennia tearing themselves apart.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on all of that. And again, I think the problem we've got is not just the people in our midst who want to hurt us. It's the people, our political class and our media class and the academic elites who don't understand the problem and who want to make the problem worse. And they are the problem too. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Give us a call 0344 499 1000. Up next, and to talk about, well, certainly part of the problem with Orla Minahan, one of the pink ladies in Epping, as thousands more marched in Crowbury yet again on Sunday yesterday over the arrival of migrant men into their town, as we saw another 600 arrive on Saturday alone. Where are we going to put them? This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 10:53 is the time. Don't forget, still welcoming your calls. Plenty of common sense on the phone lines. 0344 499 1000. Definitely going to get pink common sense from my next guest, Pink Lady campaigner Orla Minahan, who's joining us right now. A very good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you, Julia?
Very well. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, look, you've been part of these campaigns in Epping about the Bell Hotel and these ongoing legal disputes about whether or not migrants can be kept in that hotel. And that really sparked a whole load of them. We've seen thousands of people marching yet again, 6 Sunday in a row yesterday in Crowborough in East Sussex against they now reckon it's going to be about 600 migrants, single, young men of fighting age, arriving from often war-torn or basket case or both countries, and being put in a camp just 20 minutes from ordinary people wandering around their local town in East Sussex. And this is kind of part of the problem that we've been talking about in terms of the risks to our country. What do you make of these growing protests and growing public sort of being willing to speak out and to take action about this issue of illegal migrants entering our country and being put in among us?
Yeah, hi. I mean, so I went to the first protest in Crowborough, which was 6 weeks ago, and I was overwhelmed by the number of people that were there. And these people are everything from children to 90-year-old women, people in work. Every strand of the community was out. This is a little town in Sussex, 22,000 people, and they've gone about their business. Nothing's really affected them, not like some other areas, the big cities where we've seen HMOs and hotels, etc. And now suddenly they're told that they're going to have 600 men dumped in the middle of their town. Now, no curfews, no containment, left to wander around and do what they want. So ultimately, they're terrified. They've never experienced anything like this. But these are protests that have been going up and down the country for months and months and months. But still, Julia, 737 men came in on Saturday into this country, and they're the ones we know about, because I know that they're coming in on trucks, they're coming in to other
that is the key thing, and that's something, again, you think, the boats kind of started around 2018, and they'd been coming through Eurotunnel on the backs of lorries and on the ferries, and there was a feeling that they just moved to the boats. No, they're carrying on doing that. We're just not being, that's not being publicised, because it's not the same as literally watching these people all getting off with their life jackets on the beaches.
And I mean, look, so those 737 men, so that is a Crowborough camp. More than a Crowborough camp. That's a Crowborough camp and a Bell Hotel in one day, at a cost to the taxpayer of 28 million, because even the Home Office will declare that it costs £41,000 to keep an asylum seeker or an illegal migrant, depending on what the term you want to use, for a year. So the cost is spiralling it out of control. And we are seeing these men coming in week after week after week. There is nowhere to put them, Julia. So the fact is, they have to put them in camps in Crowborough and other locations because they've got nowhere to put them.
Well, indeed, we don't want them in the hotels. We're paying a fortune for them. We don't want them in, the solution is that we'll put them in local accommodation, in houses of multiple occupancy. Well, even closer to our children and young women. No, thank you. Camps, fair enough. OK, they're in a camp, but only if it's sealed and fenced and it's got armed guards, I'm afraid.
That's it.
You
they're
mentioned
allowed
the cost.
to do what they want.
Yeah, there is a financial cost, no doubt at all, but there is a cost, and again, this is where those protests at Epping started, to our young women and girls in particular. We know, rising crime generally, but particularly violence against women and girls. We've had numerous cases, and not just the sexual assault of a 14-year-old girl at Epping, another rape case that was brought that still hasn't come to trial, I believe. We've had numerous other cases. That thing that never happens, that just, funnily enough, all keeps on happening. But this comes at a time when we had the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, and I'm sure we'd have been talking about this a lot more this morning if we hadn't had the horrific events in Australia of this new policies on tackling violence against women and girls. But you can't be serious about tackling violence against women and girls if you kind of all tried to stop there being any proper expose of what was going on with the grooming gangs, most extreme violence against women and girls, and also B, if you are importing thousands of foreign men, not all of whom, of course not all of whom, are going to be rapists or sexual assaulters, but too many are, and one is too many.
Absolutely. And I mean, this is like the horse has already bolted, and now suddenly the government is seeing this outrage, and so they're trying to patch it over with a plaster. At the end, they're talking about safety for women and children as if they're building a cage around loads of chickens, but they're leaving a gate open for a fox. Yeah. It's absolute insanity. And I mean, as we said, these men are coming over day after day. A friend of mine was in Calais this weekend and said he saw thousands and thousands of men. And how many women did he see? Two women. No children, 2 women. And this is being completely ignored by people like the Greens, all these, giving us these, Calais charities. We have got no room, we can't afford them, and they are posing a risk to the most vulnerable people in society. End of story. The government have got to get a grip. They can't deal with what they've got, so why are the borders still open? It's absolute insanity. They're completely out of control.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on all of that. All of them in Pink Lady campaign. A quick word from Sam Armstrong.
Yeah, but the political reality is beginning to bite for this government, and they are not going to get away with it forever.
By the way, this was all happening for years under your lot. We need to stress that.
Well, absolutely right, and they were rightly booted out from office.
Because of it.
So will this lot be too.
So will this lot be, indeed. Love to hear your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's fast approaching 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. And I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you listen on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watch on YouTube or on your connected device, I really appreciate you joining me. Don't forget, if you miss anything from the show, go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, hit subscribe, and then you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, of course, going to talk more about that horrific attack on Bondi Beach. 15 people are now confirmed dead, including a 10-year-old girl. 30 victims remain in hospital. 5 in critical condition. Concerns that our death toll could rise after 2 gunmen carried out a deadly anti-Semitic attack on a Hanukkah celebration on Bondi Beach. The father and son assailants opened fire on Jewish families gathered at the world-famous beach for Hanukkah. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has made the point that, well, you know, it was cold-blooded murder, and pointed out he had previously warned the Australian government that you support a Palestinian state, that will fuel anti-Semitism. That's exactly what we all told Keir Starmer when he decided to recognise a Palestinian state. It's basically as a reward for Hamas and that attack on October the 7th in Israel. And this is what happens. I want to hear your thoughts, because my question to you today is, what do Western governments need to do to prevent more terror attacks like the Bondi Beach Hanukkah massacre from happening? It's a really simple question. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs 1, standard network rate message. Because it seems to me that we're going to have a lot of candles and vigils and prayers, aren't we? There's been a lot of emoting on the television, a lot of, oh, isn't this awful, a lot of hand-wringing, a lot of posts on social media from the likes of our Prime Minister and many other leaders around the world. But at the end of the day, talk is cheap, and candlelight eventually goes out, and eventually you have to stop singing Don't Look Back in Anger, and you actually have to look to the future. Because actually, I don't think our job right now is to emote and feel sorry for people and to you know, light candles and lay flowers. I think our job right now is to stop the next 10-year-old girl attending a festival on a beach from being slaughtered by crazed gunmen motivated by an insane political ideology. I think that should be our job, not buying little candles and lighting them and putting teddy bears on the ground. I don't think that saves lives. I think that does the opposite of saving lives. I think that actually leads just to the next attack, because the more time that our political leaders, and yes, our media and everyone else, the academics in universities, the teachers in our schools, the civil servants and religious leaders and everyone else, the more time they spend wringing their hands, shedding their crocodile tears, the more 10-year-old girls and their parents and all the others who have died, the innocents who died at Bondi Beach, the more they will die. It's a simple matter of time before this happens again. How do we know that? Because day in, day out, across the Western world, whether it's Australia, whether it's Canada, whether it's Britain, whether it's France, whether it's Germany, whether it's Sweden, where it's anywhere else, we are seeing attack after attack after attack by Islamist assassins. And we are seeing attack after attack after attack being foiled by our security services. It is an absolute miracle. It is a matter of simple luck that we do not see more terror attacks on all of the streets of all of the Western countries. And no, they are not just aimed at Jews. As a much wiser soul than me once said, what starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews. They are the canary in the coal mine. Because this wasn't an attack that was motivated by just a hatred of Jews. That was the key part of it. It was a hatred of the West, of democracy, of freedom, of individualism, of equality, of people just living their lives as they choose to lead their lives. This was an attack carried out by 2 gunmen, a father and son, Sajid Akram and his son Naveed Akram. One of those, thankfully, is dead. The other is in a critical condition. Extraordinarily, one of them is a man who made his life in Australia, choosing to go there of his own volition. The other is his son, born and bred in Australia. And yet they thought, for some bizarre reason that the thing that they should do in their lives that would be most important to their lives was to pledge allegiance to ISIS, the Islamic State, and to slaughter Jews at a religious festival. And this is the thing. If we don't wake up to the fact that this wasn't a senseless attack, this wasn't a one-off, this wasn't just, a mental health problem, we're often told. This was part of a concerted global attack on not just Jews, on the West. When we don't wake up to that, we just wait for the next attack. So when you see pro-Palestinian marches, whether they are Muslim or non-Muslims, marching on the streets of Britain, France, Germany, Australia, Canada, America, on campuses, on our city streets, when you see them walk along screaming and shouting and chanting, globalise the Intifada, that's what that phrase means. The Intifada is the mass slaughter of Jews. Globalise the Intifada is the mass slaughter of Jews worldwide. What did you think it meant if it doesn't mean that? So when they march on those streets and they pretend it's about worrying about little babies in Gaza under attack from the IDF after the slaughter of Israelis on October the 7th, that's not what it's about. It's about slaughtering Jews. And after the Jews, everyone else who won't accept the political Islamist ideology will be next. And the sooner our political leaders, and our media classes and religious leaders and cultural leaders and academics and everyone else in the West wakes up to that reality, that fact, the safer we will all be. And when the Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, thinks that the solution to the problem is that this gunman father used licensed guns to slaughter these innocents on Bondi Beach, so the solution must be tighter gun controls, when Australia has some of the tightest gun controls in the world. That's the same as us putting up what we laughably call peace bollards on London Bridge and Westminster Bridge, and when Germany does it around their Christmas markets to stop the slaughter of innocents by Islamist gunmen, terrorists and others. The reality is those extra defences and those extra controls will never work. They are not going to save lives now or in the future. The only thing that will save lives now or in the future is tackling that ideology. And you are never going to tackle that ideology if all of our leaders have got their heads in their hands and their heads in the sand and are refusing to acknowledge that it exists. Because, diversity is our strength, and you mustn't be Islamophobic, and you mustn't say anything nasty about anybody that might be different from the majority of the country. Well, I'm sorry. We are going to face facts. We are going to face facts, by the way, that, the biggest victims of the Islamist ideology are actually Muslims, both in the West and in the Middle East. So we need to face up to that. We need to talk about it. So does the Muslim community in this country, by the way, needs to talk about it. And if we don't talk about it, we don't face up to it, then whether it's tomorrow or next week or next month or next year, we will start my show again with a conversation about innocents being slaughtered wherever it is in the world, in the Western world, because it will be happening again, and it will keep on happening until we do something about it. So my question to you is, what do we do about it so it doesn't happen again? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to have your say. Sam Armstrong is joining me throughout the show. He's a commentator. We talked about this in the last hour as well. Cannot escape it. It is extraordinary how many platitudes any government, any political leader or religious leader can utter in the wake of these sort of events, and how wary everybody is of talking about the real issue.
They will do absolutely anything to avoid dealing with the problem and calling it out for what it is. We have a mass problem with Islamism, which has deeply embedded itself into our country. And by the way, the standard is not for what is unacceptable, going and conducting a kind of mass act of violence like this. No, frankly, it is unacceptable, in my view, unacceptable that we have 5 so-called Gazan independent politicians in Parliament elected by constituencies across the length and breadth of this country that are actively pursuing sectarian politics and fundamentally changing the very nature of our country. That is unacceptable to me. I am not prepared to live in a country in which we have sectarian politics playing out on the streets. And it is it is, as you say, permanently changing the fabric of our country. Look at Parliament now. It is a disgrace. It is covered in a sort of steel mesh of a fortress. It is
the car bollards.
It is hideous because why? We have seen time and time again people using cars. We can't ban cars, so what do we have to do? We have to surround every significant public site like a fortress. And there's so many tragedies yesterday with what happened. This young girl, 10 years old, called Matilda, brutally shot. But there was another victim there called Alex Kleitman. He was in his 80s. Yeah. He had fled Ukraine through Siberia to Australia. Why? To escape the Holocaust. He was a Holocaust survivor. He came to the West. Why? Because he felt as somebody that would contribute and make a valuable commitment to whichever country he settled in, that he would be safe there. Yep. And he was. And then mass migration and a failure...
And we betrayed him.
And a failure to deal with people because we have bought a national delusion that our history is something to be ashamed of and that all cultures are equal.
Well, no, you say we. No, but I don't think the average ordinary person has bought any of that nonsense.
I'm ashamed of myself, actually, that for a long time I felt nervous, and I still feel a little bit nervous about tackling these topics head on. I feel uncomfortable. I know.
I think it's important to talk very precisely and very carefully.
Sure, but I know because I work at the Free Speech Union that many people are cancelled every single day for calling it out. But frankly, none of those consequences should matter compared to how important it is to save our country. But I'm ashamed that I feel nervous and that I have to be. That I have to shy away from saying what I think. I won't do it anymore, and I won't do it because it has this institutional cowardice, national silence on these issues has allowed a deep and dangerous rot to set in. One consequence of which is there is a 10-year-old girl currently lying in a morgue in Sydney because politicians were not prepared to deal with the very obvious problems that existed. This does not, as you say, come as any surprise to anyone. So enough's enough. I'm going to call it as it is, and I invite anybody listening to this, anybody with any modicum of common sense, with moral courage, actually, to call it out for exactly what it is. And
the key thing is, this is not, Islamophobia at all. This is not. Again, I could not get over how many people on my social media feed when I was thinking of this. One of the absolute heroes of yesterday was a civilian, totally unarmed, already been shot in the arm and the hand, called Ahmed El Ahmed, and he disarmed the gunman father and managed to get his gun off him, and then he went and ran to join his son on the bridge where they were both eventually shot, and the father is dead, and his son is critically ill in hospital. I'm really hoping he survives, but there we are. You know, hope he spends the rest of his life in behind bars. But the amount of people who go, and it was a Muslim. It was a Muslim man. And people were saying to me, oh, bet you're gutted to find it was a Muslim. I couldn't care less. It didn't occur to me whether he was Muslim, Catholic, atheist, Jehovah's Witness. I don't care. It's totally irrelevant. Good people will do good things. Brave men and women will do brave things. This is a wonderful thing. No one is saying that, I'm sorry, I know some people are saying, and I think those people are wrong, that Muslims are the problem. I know plenty of Muslim people. The majority of Muslim people in this country and around the world are not going out trying to fight jihad. There are huge numbers, millions, particularly across the Middle East and in Africa, who are actually completely and utterly sold into this jihadi militancy. There are way too many. I would suggest one of the solutions for us would be not importing those people to our country and to the West, and certainly not making it free for them. And also, when there is a problem with those people, getting rid of them. And this is the issue. We have an issue we need to deal with, and it's an issue which Muslim so-called self-appointed community leaders should be talking about. And again, not in a, you're an Irish Catholic, so you have to condemn the IRA sort of way. It's like, this is a problem you talk about the community, well, fine. You want to be in a community, then you have to recognise you've got a problem in your midst, and you, if, as I assume you don't support it, you should help try to tackle it. If there was a problem with atheist middle-class women causing mayhem on our streets. I would like to be part of the solution to that problem rather than pretending it wasn't happening. It is really that simple. But we need to accept there are imams preaching both online and in mosque. There are schools which are teaching some of this stuff. So not only is it what's going on inside Muslim communities across this country, insular communities that are not integrating, children going to school with no children who are not Muslim, mothers who can't speak the language, don't work, living a completely sort of separate, isolated, parallel life in this country. But the other big problem we've got is, I say, our media, our political, our woke classes who have said, that's just fine, carry on as you were. Why should you have to integrate? All cultures are equal. All religions are the same. Believe what you want to believe, worship how you want to worship, do what you want to do, because, hey, our culture's not worth integrating into anyway because we're responsible for every ill in the world. And as you very articulate, that's not even a word, ironically, you put beautifully, articulately, that, you know, actually we are absolutely a superior culture in this country. That's why people want to come here. Western liberal democracies and the relationship, the individual to the state and indeed to individual to their gods as well, is actually a key part of the reason why our country and why other Western countries who have followed suit from Britain, the Anglosphere countries, are the great places to live that they are. And people who fail to recognise that and who denigrate our culture and denigrate our values, what are our values? Oh, you know, St George was from Turkey. Shut up. You're talking absolute nonsense. It's irrelevant nonsense. We weren't, migrants didn't build this country. Diversity isn't our strength. These are all complete and utter lies. They are fabrications. British people built this country. And if people want to come and live here, they are welcome to do so if they're going to have a contribution to make. But they need to, A, make a contribution, and B, they need to integrate and assimilate and adopt the values of this country. Otherwise, why are they here? And I think that shouldn't be a controversial thing to say.
I am not opposed to mass unvetted migration because every single Libyan or Syrian is a bad person. Many of them are good people. However, war-torn countries in which Islamist and frankly extreme Islamist ideologies are a mainstream part of life, people from those countries are more likely upon arrival to harbour views that are unacceptable.
We're just playing the odds at this point.
We're playing the odds. And look, it's very clear. Polls of British Muslims, and these are people answering honestly. Some of them, I suspect, are answering dishonestly to hide this. 1/3, 35% of British Muslims say in a poll that Jews have too much power in this country. I am sorry, if you are an imam, if you are a Muslim community leader, that statistic says you are failing to tackle mainstream, widespread anti-Semitic views within the British
and we
Muslim
have to accept
community.
that we've had anti-Semitism in Europe for many centuries. We know there's a reason why the Holocaust happened in Europe, okay? But we also know that we have imported a whole new strain of anti-Semitism from the Middle East. Was that a good idea? I would suggest not.
9% of the population as a whole say yes, British Jews have too much power. That includes the Muslims, and then on top of it, but within that strand, 35% of British Muslims. This is an extreme and particular problem in one community. And I, for one, do not wish to allow it to continue any longer. So it's very simple. In my view, with future migration, can we have an honest conversation about the kinds of people that are coming from different cultures? I have no problem with, frankly, mass migration from Canada or Australia or New Zealand or indeed the United States. Why? Because these are countries that share very many of the same ideals. They tend to be highly skilled, good workers, etc. Brilliant people who make a fantastic contribution to our society. However, people that have come from countries that are in the midst of constant civil war over a very long period of time, I'm sorry that they live in those countries. Really, believe me, I am. But it isn't our problem. I don't wish to change the entire way I conduct my life, the way our country looks, the way my sense of safety is when I walk down the street. I don't want to. So can we deal with that, please? And secondly, can we just be honest for once, that there is a particular problem with a extreme set of ideas within the Muslim community. 35% say yes to that anti-Semitic statement. I'm sorry, and there are others.
I believe that the majority of Muslims in this country think that people should be at least imprisoned for instance, a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad. I mean, these are not liberal values.
The majority of British Muslims hold at least one view that I consider unacceptable, deeply problematic in our society. 5 years ago, you could not even say that on the television in the way that we are doing that. It is only by virtue of the fact that there has been just this body, this total mass of evidence from very brave researchers that have gone into this and had a look at it and proven, without a doubt, that this problem exists. And yet, where is the national campaign to try and root out these very, very, very dangerous ideas? It is nowhere to be seen. And the result, these ideas have made their way into the House of Commons, into the mother of Parliament.
Oh, not just in the pro-Gaza MPs. A lot of the Labour MPs who are sitting on Labour benches and even in the Cabinet
have called for blasphemy laws. Labour MPs have called for blasphemy laws in
And we've got the definition of Islamophobia that's going to be released
marvellous.
this week.
That
Again, as you pointed out earlier, this entire conversation, we would have our collars felt by the police. Now, I've got to be honest with you, fine, seriously, I'll put the kettle on, coppers, come on in, that's absolutely fine, put the handcuffs on. I'm not going to stop having this conversation. I just don't think the British people are going to stop. And again, I think it's really important that it has to be a nuanced conversation. I don't want people saying, everyone coming here is a rapist, or everyone is. That's not true. That is simply categorically not true. And no one should be saying stuff that's not true. But you've got to have a fact-based conversation about, the risk, for instance, of, boat migrants in terms of sexual assault and other crimes, the risks in different countries. I think we're at the point where I think Donald Trump is right. I didn't like his first term, ban on Muslim countries. No. But I think we need to have a default that, no, we don't want people. There may be exceptions, but we don't want people from a whole variety of countries where you are importing internecine strife, you're importing Islam, extremist Islamist views, and you're importing extreme anti-Semitism. And I just don't think that laying bloody flowers and praying vigils and lighting candles is going to work anymore. And I also really, really think it's so important that people wake up to the fact that this is an attack on Jews. The attack on the synagogue at Heaton Park in Manchester only 2 months ago was an attack on Jews. The Jews are first on the list, but everyone else is on the list. We're all on the list. When they say globalise the intifada, we're all on the list. And that will include, by the way, moderate Muslims living their life and who are totally integrated in this country. They're on the list as well. And when I say on the list, I mean to die. I do think people need to understand. The thing I find so frustrating when we talk about senseless killing, that wasn't a senseless attack to kill people yesterday. There was sense in it. Their logic is that they are doing, Allah's work in killing the infidels. That's not senseless to them. We can't just go, we'll just educate them out of it. No, that's not how it works. It's according to their it's a political and religious ideology. That made absolute sense. It wasn't a senseless attack.
Sajid Akram believes that he is in heaven right now with virgins given over to him.
He's the father
to have a life of Riley. I happen to believe in hell, you don't, but both of us believe he ain't going anywhere near a load of virgins right now. He's not in heaven.
How do we know? Maybe his God is right, his beliefs are right. I don't know.
I
don't know. I'm an atheist.
I think they're wrong. I think Islam is not the correct religion. That's a perfectly legitimate view that millions of people hold.
But the difference is you don't want to kill people who have a different religion.
I don't want to kill anybody. Full stop. It is not the way that I was brought up. It is not our values. And by the way, nor do millions of Muslims, and nor do pretty much everybody in this country. The problem is when you import people from places in which violence has been normalised, in which extreme ideas are commonplace, you are going to get some people, like Ahmed al-Ahmed, the man who disarmed the gunman, who are heroes, but you're also going to get some people who are going to be like the gunman. That is the reality.
The thing is, you don't need the heroes if you don't have the gunmen. That's the key thing. 11:27 is the time. We're going to take your calls. Give us a call particularly. I want to know don't bother emoting at me. Don't be lighting a candle or saying your prayers. I want to know, what are we going to do to stop people being slaughtered? It's just that simple. What should Western governments do? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:30 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls about, well, what should Western governments do? Britain, maybe you might think about trying to do something to prevent more terror attacks like the Bondi Beach Hanukkah massacre. What are your thoughts? 0344 499 1000. Claudio is in London and wants to have his say. Hi, Claudio.
Hello, Julia.
Hello, what do you want to say?
Well, my first thought is, how accurate how skilled do these shooters need to be able to shoot a rifle from that distance? And
well, we understand one of them had a scope. Yeah, I don't understand these things, but yeah, they knew what they were doing. One of them was a licensed gun owner, for goodness sake.
So clearly they've been trained. So that's somewhat of a concern. To be able to shoot that accurate.
Well, he was the father was a licensed gun owner. He used to go and train. So yeah, we knew that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's completely disgraceful, and I think the government and Keir Starmer is no different. Have something to answer for, because for years they've been allowing immigration from countries where they are completely at odds with the culture of Australia and of UK, and I don't think that's really, they are partly responsible for allowing these people, and Keir's even worse now. You're not only letting people come from these countries of animosity,
yeah,
but you're also letting them come, and we don't even know anything about them.
Well, yeah, but it turns out 6 years ago, the son in this case, Naveed Akram, had been investigated over potential ties to ISIS. I mean, you think that might be something worth looking at, but then of course he's born and bred Australian.
I wouldn't let either Albanese or Starmer lead my bashoodle down the street, let alone lead a country.
There is that. Now I'm detecting an accent. Are you Australian?
I am an Australian. I'm actually an Italian citizen.
Yeah.
So I left Australia. February 2024.
Yeah.
Moved to Italy, and I'm an international pet sitter. So all I do, I travel around Europe, Italy, and UK, moving from house to house, living in people's homes, looking after their adorable pets.
Okay, a pet sitter. I was thinking pet sitter. I don't know how we got onto that, but that's random. What a life, Claudio. Thank you very much indeed for that. Don't know where we went with that. AJ's on the line, and he's in Essex. Hello, AJ.
Hi, Julia. Love to speak to you.
Lovely to talk to you. Wish it was under happier circumstances. What do governments need to do to prevent more terror attacks?
Well, I put it down to weak, pathetic politicians putting the safety of its citizens behind votes.
Yeah.
That's it. That's one point.
Well, bearing in mind in this Bondi attack, and actually, and a number of the other attacks we've had in the UK, is people who are born in the country, or in the case, the father in this case, someone who came legally to Australia.
Yeah. Well, let me get on to that subject. The subject is, this is a hateful religion.
No, Islamism is a hateful ideology. I don't think Islam is a hateful religion.
Well, people need to wake up and smell the Quran, not the coffee. Smell the Quran, because it's full of hate. I'm afraid it's full of hate.
Well, so is the Old Testament.
Yeah, who's saying anything good about any religion? Let's be honest, Julia. Religion has killed more people on planet Earth than all the wars put together.
No, that's not true. Communism has actually killed more people than religion.
Well,
genuinely, I don't know. I've never understood why Stalin and Mao get such a clean bill of health. They're responsible for far more deaths than even Hitler, terrifyingly.
We, unfortunately, have, at the moment, a cult in our country and many countries, which is killing people.
Yeah.
Just random people, random innocent men, women and children. And unfortunately, because of the weak politicians, it will continue, Julia, and it's going to get worse, and it will get worse over this Christmas period.
So what's the answer? I'm asking for answers. I don't want everyone just emoting. I want to know what should be done.
Well, what should be done is, if you want to live in a Muslim country, I know this is a bit right-wing, but if you want to live in a Muslim country, go and live in a Muslim country.
Oh, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that. I don't live in Saudi Arabia for a really good reason. I don't agree with the values of the country, so I don't live there. But if I lived there, I would expect that I'd have to prescribe to the values of the country.
Well, correct. I go to Spain quite regularly. I've got a property in Spain. So I've got, whatever the Spanish say, I've got to do, because I'm in their country.
Yeah.
But the cult of this cult, they don't care about other religions, other ways of life. They're not interested. It's their way or the highway.
Yeah, and that is the Islamist ideology. Absolutely. I'm going to have to leave it there, AJ, because time's against me. Thank you very much indeed. 11:36 is the time. I'm going to get some of your text messages and tweets as well coming in. Up next, going to talk to Dr. Casey Babb. He's from the Institute of National Security Studies in Tel Aviv. We're also going to be talking to former British Army Colonel Hamish de Bretton Gordon about, these extraordinary warnings we got from the Chief of the Armed Forces coming later today about how we all need to, as a nation, step up to take on the Russian threat. We'll talk about all of that coming up. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:38 is the time. Look, there are so many other topics we need to get to. There's so many things that are going on, but obviously so much we need to say more about that Bondi Beach terror attack. Let's talk right now with Dr. Casey Babb. He's an international fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies in Tel Aviv in Israel and joins us right now. Casey, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Obviously, absolutely horrific scenes we saw at Bondi Beach yesterday. I know you had a particular interest in it because a good friend of yours was on the beach with his wife and children and was shot in the head.
Yeah, my friend Arsen Ostrovsky, he's a friend to many people. He happens to be one of the world's most well-respected, well-known Israeli advocates. He's an Aussie. He's been in Israel for over a decade now with his family, and went back to his first home to celebrate the holidays and gets caught up in this mess. So, yeah, he was grazed in the head, seriously. You'll see clips of him online.
Yeah,
but,
I saw those yesterday. Yeah, and he did give permission
alive.
For people to share those, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, he did. Yeah. So, no, it's lucky that he made it out alive. But the carnage in Australia, as you've been talking to with other guests, it's just unfathomable.
I mean, you say it's unfathomable, and there's like a lot of people expressing shock and all that, but none of it's unfathomable, and none of it is shocking to me anymore. And I'm fascinated by people who are still shocked by this.
Yeah, I mean, I think for myself, Julia, I'm with you, but I also try to not become totally desensitized to these things. To me, yes, there are many failures on many levels, but I'm still taken aback when these events happen because they're just so inhumane and so bloody, violent, and horrific. So a lot has to change. But I hear you. These aren't one-off sort of anomalies anymore. This is a trend, and they've become really normalized.
Well, they have become normalised, and we had the attack on the Manchester synagogue only a couple of months ago here. And again, it is a miracle that we didn't see. We've got death toll so far, 15. Let's hope it doesn't rise, with 5 still critical of the 30 still in hospital in Sydney. It's a miracle that we didn't lose that sort of number at the Manchester Mosque in Heaton Park as well. It's heroes that stopped greater loss of life at Heaton Park synagogue, and it's a hero in the form of Ahmed Al-Ahmed, who disarmed the father of the 2 gunmen in Sydney that perhaps prevented some loss of life there in Sydney. But the same issue has been going on and it's something that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, has called out time and time again in Australia and in many countries in Europe and in Britain, of course, and again, this recognising of Palestine, the rewarding of the Hamas terror group for their attack on October the 7th on Israel, basically not doing anything about pro-Palestinian marchers. There's still video footage up of people on the streets outside the Sydney Opera House shouting, "Where are the Jews? Gas the Jews," openly in English on the October the 8th, 2023, the day after the massacre of 1,200 Jews in Israel. They're shouting "Globalise the Intifada," and I was remonstrating with people all day yesterday. What did you think "Globalise the Intifada" means? It means slaughter Jews worldwide. Well, that's what people are doing. How much do you hold Western governments responsible for these events?
I mean, you have to hold them accountable. There's been at least 48 very serious incidents at synagogues or Jewish events worldwide, throughout the Western world since October 7th. So, we're talking, a couple every month for the last over 2 years. And so what they've done, what these individuals have done consistently is they've tested governments, they've tested institutions, and they've tested, the whole of society. They've been moving the goalposts, protesting, if that's what we want to call it, demonstrating outside Jewish hospitals, outside Jewish neighborhoods, dressing up like Hamas terrorists in public, calling for genocide. the campus protests that were so disruptive and at times violent, intimidating individuals. You know, all of this is them going, oh, how much further can we go?
Yeah.
And naturally, at a certain point, they're going to want to kill people. And that's what they've done numerous times since October 7th.
But again, also, when, and it's a point a guest of mine made earlier, Brendan Indo, when Israel is demonized to such an extent as it has been by not just, the West, Middle Eastern governments, by the pro-Palestinian mob, by the far left, by the far right, and then by mainstream governments in the West, by the Starmers, the Macrons. I know you're Canadian, by Mark Carney in Canada. When they are demonized, then you kind of, they're killing babies, committing genocide apparently in Gaza. I mean, never happened. As in, of course, children died. It's terrible. That's what happens in war. But when they're demonized to such an extent, it then becomes justifiable for people to take retributive action, which is what they regard October the 7th as, and the synagogue attack and the Bondi Beach attack and all the others. But that's it. They've legitimized that. So what is the answer? The question I'm asking my audience today: what do Western governments need to do to prevent more of these terror attacks? Because I don't think that prayers and thoughts and lighting candles and vigils is the answer.
Oh, I'm with you. And, some people might not like my answer here, but I don't think what, our leaders need to do is particularly complicated. People are looking for these new, innovative solutions. What are we going to do? They have to use their head and their mouths. And, unfortunately, over the last few years, this seems to be increasingly a challenge for them. To your point, Julia, as I mentioned, it's not just that they've been moving the goalposts. It's that they've been saying the most egregious, dangerous, and destructive things. I'm talking about, these agitators, these protesters, these activists, whatever you want to call them, for over 2 years. Spreading the genocide libel, which is arguably the most dangerous and appalling in contemporary Jewish history, maybe one of the most damaging of all time. The deliberate famine libel, all of these anti-Jewish conspiracy theories, all of the Israeli conspiracy theories, the hatred. When we don't say anything in response to that, we just give these people oxygen. So
Western governments do say, they say, oh, no, you shouldn't say that. No, this is terrible. But they don't do anything.
I to a certain extent, I disagree, because those voices are so loud and so consistent. If you said, give me an example of a Western leader at a university, in a government, in a large corporation that has come out consistently and loudly and said, no, there is no genocide, there is no this, there is no that. I couldn't really give you
No, that is true. There was a government report here, but everyone just kept a bit quiet about it. It was all a bit embarrassing because it didn't tie in with it. But in terms of just words are useful, words are help, they're a start. But what actions should Western governments take?
Well, then the other action is use existing laws. People keep coming up with these new ideas for new laws. Most countries have the laws in place. You just have to enforce them. Unfortunately, we've taught, our militaries, we've taught our police services, we've taught individuals as a whole generation that, let's not infringe on people's rights. Let's not, they're calling for the death of Jews. That must just be a sort of a cultural thing. Let's freedom of speech.
Making excuses. So again, we have the right to protest, but not to shout for the death of Jews or the death of the West.
No, that's, a lot of this is incitement. And a lot of this, most countries have laws against inciting violence. Enforce them. This isn't rocket science. Push back against the madness in front of the microphone and use the laws that have been in place in many cases for decades.
I mean, okay, we know that a lot of the problem is people who are born in this country, often second generation Islamists. Are we talking about deportations of people? Are we talking about closing borders?
Well, Julia, I mean, you see that a lot online. You see people say deport, deport, deport. That's easier said than done. And look, when you're letting in hundreds of thousands or millions of individuals over years, as your other guests and contributors have noted, from countries where this sort of hate is very normalized and very ingrained in the culture, from countries, mind you, that have quite literally purged their entire Jewish populations. You want to talk about a Nakba? Go look at the former Jewish population of the Middle East.
Yeah.
But once citizens become citizens, it's hard to unwind that.
Yeah.
So governments and institutions and societies need to do more. We need to demand more of people.
Yeah.
And we're too afraid to do that. And
well, again, people often say we. I don't think the majority of the British public are. I think our governing classes are. Dr. Casey Babb will have to leave their international fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies in Tel Aviv. Listening to that is commentator Sam Armstrong. It's interesting how much even people who speak out these things, they kind of want to talk around the houses and be a bit careful about it. We basically enabled people, empowered them by saying, yeah, you shout for globalised intifada and from the river to the sea, and you wear your keffiyehs on the streets, and we'll pretend it's all about us being liberal. You can do all of that, but actually, you know, we've empowered these people, and we are not challenging it.
Yeah, and such an interesting point about the fact that there did used to be a Jewish diaspora across the Middle East. There used to be a Christian diaspora too, and then what happened is an extreme form of Islam began to grow and spread in the 1950s. It took over, and as a result, Jews fled here, Christians fled here. Yeah. They're now being followed, and, well, they're going to have to move again, they fear.
This is the terrible thing, isn't it? 11:49 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk about, well, what we should also be fearing here, and that is the threat of Russia. The most senior figure in the British military has warned, well, again, everyone's talking here about tackling anti-Semitism and the threat from Islamist ideology. We're also going to have to tackle, as a nation, the threat from Russia. But what does he mean by that? Well, we'll talk to Hamish de Bretton Gordon about that. Up next, this is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show. 11:53 is the time. Keep those calls coming in. 0344 499 1000 on what the West should be doing to prevent more terror attacks like the Bondi Beach Hanukkah massacre from happening. But also, what should we be doing to deal with the threat from Russia? Because interestingly, later on today, we've seen some advanced words. The Air Chief Marshal, Sir Richard Knighton, he's Chief of the Defence Staff, the most senior military officer in this country. He's going to use a speech this evening to urge the British public to make defence and resilience a higher priority. He says that the whole of the UK, not just its armed forces, need to step up to deter the threat posed by Russia of a wider war in Europe. This follows calls from the senior naval chief a week or two ago, and also the MI6 chief, Blaise Metrowelli, basically saying that the front line is everywhere and that Britain is already on the front line against Russia and should be ready for Putin's export of chaos. So how worried should we be? Well, let's talk to Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, OBE, a former British Army colonel. Good morning to you, Hamish.
Hi, good morning,
Thank
Julia.
you for joining us. I mean, it seems to me military leader after military leader, they're not waiting until they retire to speak out. They are saying it while they're in the job. We are in basically, we are effectively waiting for a hot war to break out, and we need to prepare to prevent that from happening. Do you agree with them?
Well, I do, absolutely. And I'm delighted that people like CDS are now talking exactly as you say before it's too late and they can have an impact. And as you said, the head of MI6 have warned that Russia poses an acute threat to us. She talks about the cyber attacks and the drone attacks. The JLR, Jaguar Land Rover cyber attack, costs the government $1.5 billion to bail out, which is money that can now not be spent on defence. So
no, Jaguar should have perhaps had their own insurance, their own proper cyber protection, which they didn't have, I understand.
Well, I'm no great expert on cyber, but whatever they did or didn't have, it's cost us all a hell of a lot of money. But I think the point is that, undoubtedly it had Russian DNA all over it.
Yeah.
We've seen the Russian spy ships checking out our undersea cables and pipelines, no doubt, again, to have an impact on us. And we've seen drones stopping flying around. So I think it's a realization, and everything that's happening in Russia and Ukraine at the moment. And I personally don't believe that Putin has any interest in peace. He's not going to blink, but he's pretty certain that we will blink.
Yeah. And he's probably right.
He is, but the key thing that we can do is to show what we have, what CDS is calling national resilience.
When you say CDS, you mean Chief of the Defence Staff?
Yes, sorry.
Most of us don't know that.
National resilience, which we just can't rely on the military for because we've been holed out so much.
Well, what do we mean by this? Because we're spending way less than 3% of our GDP on national defence, and we're going to make it up 3.5% in about 5 years' time. Well, we're not. It's going to be playing around with numbers, and it needs to be way more than that, and it needs to be tomorrow or even yesterday rather than in a few years' time. Everyone who's got any clue what's going on is saying that, but our politicians aren't doing that. What on earth can the British public be doing to further our resilience other than pressurising our government to spend a heck of a lot more money and put more resources and focus on our national defences? What else are we supposed to be doing?
Well, I think there's a lot we can do, and they do talk about what's called a strategic reserve. There are about 1 million veterans like myself still in the country who could certainly be used and are very keen to get involved as well. And I think, any citizen of this country who doesn't want to get involved and doesn't want to help out to provide national resilience should probably consider whether they should be here at all. But I think there are a lot of things.
But there'll be lots of Brits whose families have been in this country for many, many centuries who will say, I've heard this from callers. I don't want to fight for this country. I don't believe in this country.
Well, then presumably they're quite happy that this country is run by somebody else. And I think the vast majority of us don't. And the realisation from MI6 and from the military is that we are under severe threat from the Russians. And nobody thinks they're going to stop if they prevail in Ukraine. But the way to stop them is to show that we have a strong conventional deterrent so that Putin does blink and doesn't just think that we're weak and capitulate, which, unfortunately, as you suggest, some people in this country might prefer that.
But how much can we control this? Look, we don't have conscription. We've seen some civil conscription in France. We know in Finland, or actually lots of other countries around Europe are now moving to this way. Do we need to actually, actually have a national service of some kind? We need to get our young people trained up, ready, so if and when they are called to arms, because a lot of people just say we're both warmongers.
Well, yeah, I quite agree. I think we need to have plans for it. We don't need it now. The strategic reserve, the veterans, they're all keen to get involved. Absolutely. We have to look at our European, people like the Finns and the Swedes, where everybody is trained and they can put a lot of people on the ground, but they're a lot closer to the threat than we are. I think we just need plans, because if it all does go badly, and the worst case scenario that we do get involved in a conflict in Europe, then yeah, I'm afraid we'll all be involved. So we need plans rather than just trying to ignore it, that we have done since the end of the Cold War.
And we have been ignoring it. Our politicians have been ignoring it. But one of the reasons they've done that is because it's quite convenient not to have to spend a huge chunk of our national income on defence and spending it on, nurses or free this, free that, a bit more welfare, everybody. That's what people prefer, isn't it?
Well, one can see, and certainly I'm sure the present government would say that's what they were voted in on. But unfortunately, the situation is rapidly changing. And if we spend all the money, all the government money on welfare and other things, then we will not have a defence to be able to carry on in the way that people would like to live in this country.
I'm wondering if we could solve a lot of this with, hey, no more welfare for anyone under the age of 30. You're joining the military. That might focus minds in lots of different ways, eh? Hamish Breton-Gordon, I'd love to talk to you for longer. You can hear the music heading up to the top of the hour. Former British Army Colonel. He certainly supports what the Chief of the Defence Staff is saying. Love to hear your thoughts on this as well. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. It's gone midday. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is Talk. We are the home of common sense. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or your connected device, it is great to have your company. So appreciate you getting in touch. Don't forget, you can go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, we've called it, so you can find it nice and easily. Hit subscribe. You never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, of course, we're going to be talking more about that horrific Bondi Beach terror attack. 15 people now confirmed dead, including a 10-year-old girl and a Holocaust survivor who'd moved to Australia. 30 victims still in hospital, 5 in critical condition. So we're just hoping that that death toll doesn't rise. I want to hear your thoughts on what Western governments should do to prevent more terror attacks like that Hanukkah attack at Bondi Beach, because I don't think the vigils and the candle lighting and the not looking back in anger is working, because I think the problem's getting worse. Maybe we should try another tactic, eh? Love to hear your thoughts on that. Lots of messages coming in, lots of calls on the board. I'm going to try to get to as many as I can in the next hour or so. But 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1 standard network rate message. In just a couple of moments, we're going to be talking more about Bondi Beach, but we're also going to be talking more about what's going to go on with this doctors' strike. Resident doctors due to strike this week. A 5-day strike. They're going to be a result of a vote by doctors about that strike, whether or not it's going to go ahead, given the super flu we've got at the moment. We'll be talking about that, but also we're going to be talking about, well, some net zero sense from Kemi Badenoch, the Conservatives. She's pledging to scrap electric car subsidies and the ban on sales of new petrol cars if the Tories win the next election, because the current net zero targets are economic self-harm. Well, yeah, except we knew that when they were brought in. Some of us were saying it out loud. But we'll talk about all of that coming up. First up, let me introduce you once again to commentator Sam Armstrong. Afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
You're very smiley and cheerful, given that we're talking about a horrible story about what's been going on at Bondi Beach. But I want to get your thoughts on what our last guest had to say just before the top of the hour. And if you've missed it, go back and look at it on YouTube. Mr. Breton Gordon, who he's also a chemical weapons expert. He was out in Iraq. He was out in Syria. It means that the man knows his stuff. But he's a former British Army colonel, talking about this speech we're expecting tonight from the Air Chief Marshal, Sir Richard Knighton. He's the Chief of the Defence Staff, and he follows on from the Chief Naval Officer a couple of weeks ago, and MI6 Chief, now the new C at MI6. All of whom are talking about the threat from Russia. And it's what's really interesting about this Air Chief Marshal is saying is that the whole of the UK, not just its armed forces, need to step up to deter the threat posed by Russia. And we need to make defence and resilience a higher priority. Now, that's not just about, I don't know whether, should we have national service, some sort of conscription? Is that about cyber security? Is it about our ability to deal with it? But it's also about we need to spend more money. We are seeing a concerted attempt by not the usual suspects of former military heads, talking heads saying this, but current ones saying we are not spending enough, we are not taking the threat seriously, we need to step up, spend more and get our act together. But what does that actually involve?
Well, it's the inevitable reality of the American changing in posture, which is Donald Trump saying, I am not prepared to pick up the bill for Europe's security any longer.
And fair enough.
Fair enough, given that Europe, the UK, frankly, better than most, has not been pulling its weight to defend itself, has not been spending properly frankly, much more than 2% of its GDP on defence, as well as it should be. But there is another interesting element in both of these speeches today. It seems like it's new boys in British security speaking, the new chief of MI6 and the new chief of the defence staff, which is the country they're not mentioning, which is China. It seems to me that there has been a very deliberate attempt or ruling from Downing Street, perhaps, that they are allowed to talk about the threat from Russia, but China, a country which the United States at least believes poses a much bigger threat, well, you're not allowed to talk about that. And the question is, why? Why doesn't Keir Starmer want it? Is it because, as many people say, that he's slightly compromised and he's so desperate for Chinese investment that he's basically gagging our security chiefs and calling out the threat?
They keep delaying the decision because they know they're going to be in a lot of trouble for it. But giving the go-ahead to this Chinese embassy just across the river here, which everyone says is going to be a security risk. There is obviously we do actually have a war right now in Europe. That's a more immediate threat, and there is an element where with China, well, at least the the Americans are going to step in. They are going to probably do something, we hope, to tackle China and the threat to Taiwan. But again, if you think that's not a threat to us, wake up and smell the roses, because lockdown and the Ukraine war are going to look like paradise compared to the effect on our economies and our world from war in Taiwan. But it does seem to be that we've been talking all day about what Western governments need to do to prevent more terror attacks like the Bondi Beach Hanukkah massacre from happening. It's exactly the same thing. This heads in the sand. Yeah. This let's just pretend it's not happening. And the same as we have the Cold War and the growth of Putin's militaristic ambitions and what's happened. It heads in the sand even when Putin put 120,000 troops and tanks on the Ukrainian border. Heads in the sand when Donald Trump way back in 2018 warned, or 2016, sorry, I'm going to walk away from NATO if you guys aren't going to fund what's going on. And it's a plague on all the houses of everybody, France and Germany and Italy and most of the Western European countries, and certainly in Britain. We've not been spending enough. We do not take that threat seriously. We want to walk on the world stage, be taken seriously. If you ain't got the weapons, if you haven't got the guns, you haven't got the bullets, and you haven't got the drones, and you haven't got the missiles, you haven't got the warships, you haven't got the men on the ground, frankly, your words count for sod all.
Yeah. Get real. The world is not quite as good a place as the progressive left have tried to pretend it is. There are real enemies out there in the world. And by the way, they have been telling you for a long time what they intended to do.
They say the quiet bit out loud.
Putin says he's going to invade. Premier Xi says he's going to invade Taiwan. Take them seriously. And when vast chunks, and I'm afraid at 35% at least holding one or more extreme views in the Muslim community, when a big chunk of the Muslim community in this country holds extreme views, tells you they hold extreme views, take that seriously and deal with something before and not after a 10-year-old girl, amongst others, is shot in the head.
Absolutely. Well, that leads us to our next guest, Dr. Alan Mendoza, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society, who's been, speaking out against the terror threat in our midst for a very, very long time. Dr. Alan Mendoza, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, Julia.
Again, wish we were talking under happier circumstances, but that thing that never happens has just happened again, this time in Australia. Last time, in terms of dealing with what the Jewish population had to deal with, it was at the Heaton Park Synagogue in Manchester. Another attempt on people's lives at a Christmas market in Germany and Bavaria was foiled over the weekend as well. These attacks keep on happening. We know what the motivation is. They're not senseless, mindless attacks by cowards. They are absolutely thought through, clearly targeted attacks on Jews, particularly, but also on anyone in the West, on Western values and integration and equality and all of that, by Islamist fascists. But they aren't senseless, are they? The question I'm putting to my audience: what do Western governments need to do to prevent these attacks from keeping on happening? What's the answer to that?
Well, sadly, there's so much they need to do, and there's so much they fail to do for so long. And, I've been speaking about this for 20 years, I'm sorry to say. And throughout that time, the action government has actually taken, despite there being comprehensive sets of policies put down, whether they're by organisations like the Henry Jackson Society, or whether they are official government reviews like the Casey Review, or when Dame Sarah Khan opined on the subject, or when William Shawcross opined on the subject, official reviews, nothing seems to get done. So the very first step is government should actually enact the policies that have been put before them, particularly by official inquiries. They have, passed the data. They have looked at the information at hand. They have suggested how you can deal with this radicalisation and extremism, and successive governments have totally failed to take it seriously. Why? Because either they are they think it's a problem that is less of importance to other problems, or they just think it's dangerous to get involved in this game, and you can pick whichever option you want from that. But it's not a game. People die as a result of failing to take this seriously, and more people will die because our government here and other governments around the world still does not take this seriously and will not take the steps required to clamp down on this extremism.
It's too uncomfortable for them to face up to. And yet, again, I can remember whether it's, David Cameron when he was Prime Minister, having reports into this. I remember, way back when, the later years of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, people were recognising what was going on. Remember, we had the 2005, terror attacks. And London, 7/7 in London. This has been going on for a long time, and everyone talks about it, and they kind of get there. They sort of just touch at the edge of we need to talk about it and talk about integration and all of this stuff, and then they never do anything about it. So give us some specifics. One thing I'm really trying to get people today, give me some specifics. What do we do? We've got millions of people in this country who have come from abroad. Some have come here to, frankly, to do our country ill. Or they've had children who want to do our country ill. We need to face up to that. That is a reality. It is neither racist nor Islamophobic or anything else to make those statements. It is a simple matter of fact. Virtually all of the terror attacks in this country are Islamist, not far right, and virtually all of those terror attacks have been carried out by either first or second generation migrants. So the children of migrants or the migrants themselves. I think to ignore that is frankly criminal in itself. What do we do about it?
Well, like I said, I've given you the reviews. You can go and look up. Anyone can look them up.
But we're not all sitting and looking at the reviews. You've looked at them. You're an expert in this field. You've been talking about this. Give us some practical things.
Stop hate preaching, number one. Throw people in prison who do it or deport them. It's really that simple from the starting point. Look at who is funneling money into religious institutions into this country. Who is actually paying the piper, as it were, and what tune are they piping as a result of it? Ban those foreign contributions from people you don't want funding religious institutions in this country. Then look at groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, prescribed in large parts around the world. They should be prescribed here as being dangerous and an endemic threat to the population, both the Muslim population here and the general population of this country. Then look at when you're going into communities, end segregation, end the idea of ghettoization, kind of move populations around. Do not allow demographic clusters that turn into a uniculture, as it were, in one place that is not the uniculture of this country. So you've got many ways you can do that. All the proposals have been looked at. They're all there. It just needs a government to come in, set up, and actually do it. And that's what we're waiting for right now. The prescriptions are all there. They've all been laid out for years and years and years. When is the government or a government going to come and turn around and say, I value the national security of this country, I value the idea of social cohesion, I value the idea of integration, and I'm prepared to actually make sure this happens. Until we get that, we're going to keep on having this kind of disunity and chaos and devastation.
This is the thing, though. I mean, it's like you mentioned the Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, basically prescribed, banned across large parts of Islamic
the Muslim world,
yes. The Muslim world, because of the threat. Because Hamas and everything, they are an extremist terrorist organisation, and yet the West doesn't ban them. Well, why not?
Because again, governments think it's either a lesser order problem, and there are other bigger problems that come about. Look, for example, I can tell you exactly why we didn't have action on the Casey review. David Cameron's government put this in place. Okay, they did the review, and then they got turfed out. Or rather, Cameron resigned. The new government came in and had bigger problems.
And that review was basically Louise Casey, who's responsible for it. She has a sensible review that only takes a short amount of time. She just gets on with the job, which is basically people are living in segregated communities and they're isolated and they're not integrating, and this is part of the problem. And it is that part of the issue? Because often we'll hear from people that, someone who's been involved in a terror attack, they seem completely, westernised, living a completely normal life. We had the wife and the mother of these two father and son gunmen. But they say, didn't think there was any issue, although it turns out the son had been investigated by security in Australia over links with ISIS, the Islamic State, that often these people are living completely normal lives, very difficult to identify, and especially when they're being radicalised online, very difficult to find it. So it's one thing having an imam who's radicalised, who's been imported and who's preaching in a mosque and telling youngsters terrible things and inciting them to sort of turn on people in the country they live in. But it's quite another if someone's doing it online. How do you stop that?
Well, the online side, you're quite right to point out there are multiple routes to radicalisation here. And what you're trying to do is cut off as many of them as possible to stop it from happening. Now, obviously, online radicalisation is very difficult to stop because unless you have sweeping reform of what goes on social media or indeed on the dark web, it's kind of impossible to stop it. But there are always going to be signs, aren't they? In this case, one of the key signs, which you would normally expect to be picked up, i.e. the person's family going, my son or is acting a bit weirdly, was actually amplified by the father being part of it.
Yeah.
So you had one of the normal safeguards that you would normally see, i.e. parents noticing what's going on with a kid, not happening in this context because the father was in on the act, basically.
But hold on a minute. I mean, it's a different kind of example, although, of course, led to horrific loss of life, this houseboat attack at Oxford-Rudagabana. The parents flagged an awful lot of the problems. A lot of the problems were blatantly, everyone was aware. The social workers were too scared to go to the house without police support. That's how dangerous they thought this boy was. He wasn't allowed in school. I mean, there was because he'd attacked kids in school. They knew it all, and they still didn't do anything about it. I'm guessing the Australian authorities are just as... Look, I'm not going to say just as bad as us. We know that our authorities they are catching people all the time. They are preventing atrocities all the time. But they're not catching enough people. They're not, the resources they've got. And again and again and again, people are slipping through the net. I can't think of a single case we've had, certainly with a terror attack here, where we don't find out eventually they were known to the authorities.
Well, exactly. So there are always tells along the line, and it's really about how the intervention occurs. But don't forget, Julie, the last figures that I saw about people on the terror watch list, 43,000 people on the terror watch list. That is a heck of a lot of people who the authorities have to be keeping tabs on at any given moment. That is a huge surveillance task. That is a huge investment in equipment and in surveillance and all the things you need to do. And it is something that we have to get to grips with, because if we don't do this, we will end up with more chaos emerging.
And we certainly are ending with more chaos emerging. In terms of the threat in particular to Jews in this country, in America, in Canada, in Australia, in France, Germany, everywhere, we are seeing a rise in anti-Semitic attacks. Are those being driven by just sort of the arrival of migrants from a part of the world where anti-Semitism is, I've also completely the norm? Or is there something else going on? Is it, we've seen the rise in anti-Semitism being an acceptable, normal viewpoint, on the left under Corbyn's Labour. We've seen it in the far right. The mainstreaming of anti-Semitism in the form of anti-Israel and Israel being responsible for all the ills in the Middle East and indeed the world is a form of anti-Semitism, many of us would certainly argue. But is this something we have imported, or was this a problem here, or is it a combination of the two?
Well, it is a combination of the two, of course. There's always been a far-right problem. That's always been the case. There has always, interestingly, been a far-left problem, but it's grown in prominence because it has spread far beyond just the usual suspects on the far left and has infected more of the left than simply the far left. So that's extended that side. But clearly, a large chunk of the people you see protesting about Israel and also the ones who are then shouting about Jews are people from at least a migrant background, in some cases, a form. And the classic case of this was in Germany. Don't forget, when the Germans imported 1 million Syrians in the mid-2000s, a couple of years later, Angela Merkel had to send a letter to all the people who'd come in saying, this is Germany, we're not anti-Semites here, what are you doing? She hadn't figured out that people had brought in anti-Semitism from their own culture into Germany and were willing to carry it out on German streets. And that is, that's the Chancellor of Germany who had to acknowledge that her own policy had led to a surge in anti-Semitism in Germany, of all places. So, you can see that it's a combination factor. And the numbers, the number side is obviously on the migrant community side, because that's the growing part of the population. And again, if you don't get a grip on this, and we did a poll last year, if you recall, where you saw, significant numbers, up to maybe as many as 5 in 10 of British Muslims expressing anti-Semitic views of some kind. Yeah. That tells you there's a bigger problem than simply one about Islamism. There's a cultural issue behind this all, and that has to be dealt with.
Well, how did you say dealt with? Again, how are we going to educate and change people? Apart from the fact that we've got, most of the mainstream media. I think the BBC and others have been pushing, frankly, I think, anti-Semitism. They can emote on days like this, but frankly, their coverage of what's been going on in Gaza has been, I think, part of the problem. But you've got academics, I mean, just outrageous views held by many academics, I believe now, teaching colleges, many of our politicians. We have got a problem. How on earth are we going to re-educate people when the people who be doing the re-education are part of the problem?
The only entity that has the power to do this wholesale within British society is the state. That's, because the state's writ can reach all those people if it wants to. And if you look at what Donald Trump's been doing in the US on anti-Semitism, look, he's not popular universally, but on anti-Semitism, he's taken some amazing steps on university campuses, for example, to force universities to confront their anti-Semitism problems. He's looked at politicians dealing with them in the same way. There are things that governments can do and should be doing to confront these problems. They can do them. They've got the power. Certainly the British government's got the power if it wants to tackle this root and branch all the way up from a community level to institutions, but it requires significant leadership to do that, and that is what is currently lacking.
Indeed, Dr. Alan Mendoza, thank you for joining, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. Very much appreciate that. Sam Armstrong, still with me in the studio. It is interesting when we talk about, got to be dealing with prescribed groups. We need to be, worrying about, funding. We've got to, I think everyone's saying, got to recognise the problem in the first place. Yes. Maybe stop importing more of the problem might be a solution. But we nevertheless, we have a whole load of people. And whether you're talking about, ISIS bride, Shamima Begum, born and bred in Bethnal Green in East London, just over there, outside the window, but believing that, ISIS was the future and not British culture. We have a huge number of people in this country, and again, it's not the majority, but it's a very, 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 very sizable minority of the 4 million plus people who are here. Either people who've come as migrants in the past, or new migrants in particular, but also from certain countries, but also people who their children and their grandchildren who are being radicalised, or have arrived radicalised, who hold views that simply are not compatible with Western liberal values. Well, what are we going to do about that? How are we going to re-educate? How are we going to change their minds if the people who we use to do that, frankly, are all signed up to a lot of that madness?
Yeah, and frankly, you cannot begin to deal with the massive problem that exists in Britain's inner cities when you keep adding to the problem every year at a scale far larger than you would ever be able to de-radicalise. When you speak to professionals in this space, they will tell you it's actually a really, really difficult problem to go about changing people's mind, particularly changing people's mind at a very large number of people level. And then what you do is you pile people on top of that, and then you look at who is preaching in Britain's mosques. And I go back to this case because we learned about it a couple of weeks ago, and I just think it's mad. The literal commander of Al-Shabaab /IS in Somalia was preaching not so long ago at mosques in Birmingham and London, having arrived in this country as a refugee from where? From Sweden. He'd come to this country because he was upset he was being persecuted for attempting to female genital mutilate his own daughter. So he comes to this country, and what do? We say, oh great, we've got a job for you at a mosque preaching to British young Muslims. And then we turn around and we wonder, why do we have this kind of problem in this country? We need to get rid of this cruel compassion, so-called compassion that we have, that is destroying our country before our very eyes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Sam Armstrong, thank you very much. Going to get you up to date on what's been going on in Liverpool Crown Court in just a couple of moments' time. Also with Paul Doyle, he's the man who drove into the Liverpool FC fans way back earlier in the year. And we're going to just bring you some update from the court there. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Afternoon, welcome back to the show. It's 12:28. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk. Just to get you up to date before we go to some calls from you about Paul Doyle. He is the 54-year-old who has admitted a total of 31 charges just late last month after driving his car into Liverpool FC's fans as they were celebrating their Premier League title parade earlier this year in May. And we've got the first of 2 days of sentencing hearings for him at Liverpool Crown Court today. We've actually been hearing from the prosecutor describing Doyle using his vehicle as a weapon and saying that basically he had driven dangerously, frightening people, and he had been angry and that basically he said he used his vehicle as a weapon during that time. The court was shown what they called shocking dashcam footage of the attack with the actual view of the Doyle's car driving into the crowds, with Doyle swearing at the crowds, and the prosecutor calling this truly shocking footage. And as pedestrians are being driven into, we could hear him shouting, "Move out the effing way," tooting his horn. Some forced onto the bonnet of his car. Some other language that is absolutely, we can't repeat on this show. But no question at all, as the prosecutor said, the truth is a simple one. Doyle lost his temper. Also pointing out that many people thought that what was taking place was, and I think we all thought at the time, was a terrorist attack. And they ruled out there was any ideology behind that. He was sober. He's not under the influence of drugs or any alcohol. And the prosecutor said the truth is a simple one. Paul Doyle just lost his temper in his desire to get where he wanted to get to. In a rage, he drove into the crowd. So, I mean, very, very, very damning summing up there from the prosecutor. We'll be hearing from defence, obviously, over the next couple of days as well. Let's go straight to your calls now, though. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call about that horrific attack in Bondi Beach. I want a really specific answer. What do Western governments need to do to prevent more terror attacks like that? Let's go to Ray, who's in Essex. Hello, Ray.
Good afternoon, Julie.
Afternoon. What do you want to say, my love?
Well, as far as the government is concerned, they have to stop the extremism of the Palestinian marches throughout the world. It's perfectly legitimate for anybody to march against what Israel is doing. It is not legitimate to support Hamas. That's say kill Jews by the relatives.
Ray, I'm just going to stop you. Your line keeps cutting in and out. I'm assuming you're on a mobile. Can you walk somewhere else or hold your phone differently?
Yeah, I'm near the window. Is that better?
That's better.
And so this is the one thing they could do, which they choose not to. In fact, if any Jews go near the marches, they're told to go away because they look too Jewish.
Yep. So what you're talking about warning going out. It's simple. If you have these flags, you shout these slogans, globalise the Intifada from the river to the sea. Would you say they need to be banned? And if you chant those, police need to move in?
They need to be arrested and charged.
OK, and the police keep saying, look, we need to keep the peace. As they say, they do arrest some people later on. Do you think they're doing enough? Obviously not.
Well, they haven't arrested that band leader who was saying death to the IDF, when you consider that 90% of all Israelis are automatically called into the IDF. Yeah. So that means kill all the Jews.
Yeah, it does. It does. That was Bob Villan. Yeah, I mean, again, extraordinary that we haven't had. And we had another ban, Massive Attack. Was it Massive Attack, I think, over the weekend, having or what was it? I mean, it wasn't Massive Attack. I don't want to be, I can't remember. I thought it was. But having a swastika and an Israeli flag sort of intertwined as their set.
Yes. Julia, may I make another point? I'm an 84-year-old British Jew, born in Nottingham in 1941. I've lived my life in this country, and I'll die in this country. I fear for my grandchildren, because they are young. I do not think they will live in this country. As far as I'm concerned, Jews are not living in this country in 2025, going into 2026. We're living in 1935, going into 1936. And all the Jews in this country should think very carefully about an exit plan.
Every Jewish family I know has talked about that, and I think that is an absolute stain on our nation and our leaders, that anyone in this country should have that conversation. I feel that same way about Muslims or Catholics or anybody else, that anyone would ever feel that way.
Yes, and finally, because I know you've got other people, if they deal with the Jews, who do you think they'll come for next?
Exactly. Ray, I really appreciate your call. Thank you so much. Kevin is on the line in Derbyshire. Hello, Kevin. What do you want to say?
Yeah, Julia, about what can they do to control things. We've got to get a grip for a start of those borders, and the way to do that is stop it at source. We've got to stop letting these people in, these doctors, scientists, and everybody that comes on a boat, engineers, nurses. Those people don't come on a boat. They come the legal way. We've got to close our borders to illegal immigrants. And I don't care where they come from, even if they come from France, Jim. If they're illegal, they're illegal.
Yeah.
And they should be told, you're not going to get any benefits. You're not going to get £4,000.
You're not going to be free on our streets. My thing, I forget the money. I don't want them free on our streets.
No, exactly. You may as well just open all those prisons up and let them have a wander around.
Well, they do that too.
Well, they do that as well. Of course they do. But we should stop it at source and say, if you come, you're being deported. You will not even be looked at to come in. If you come illegal, you're going back either where you've come from or...
What about people
Rwanda.
who've arrived here legally and people who've been born here?
If they've arrived here legally, then yes. But I think before we start tackling things here, we need to stop it at the source.
You're saying that's the first thing to do. But what are we going to do about homegrown? Actually, an awful lot of our terrorists in this country, Islamist terrorists, have actually been second-generation people born here, often to immigrant families, but born here.
Well, yes, I agree. And I do think...
What do you do about that?
I think parents and I think mosques leaders, they're not... What are they preaching? Are they telling... like you say, has anybody come on this morning to condemn Bondi? No, I doubt it. And not all Muslims. I've got people that I know that are Muslims. That are good people, hard-working people for this country. But are they actually preaching our values? And I doubt it. I don't think they are.
That's the concern. And where they're not, it needs to be stopped. I mean, again, this is the thing. Tolerance of intolerance breeds intolerance, not tolerance. Kevin, thank you for that. 12:36 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Going to talk about, small matter of a winter health crisis in the NHS, because we have one of those every year. It usually follows the autumn crisis and the summer crisis, which follows the spring crisis, which follows the winter crisis from the year before. This time round, we've got super flu as well. Oh, yes, and the doctor's strike that's on Wednesday. Or is it? We're going to find out later today whether or not a vote taken online on behalf of the BMA is actually going to decide to call off that resident doctor's strike 5 days running into Christmas. Talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. It's coming up to 12:39. Let's talk about, well, the small matter of the NHS in crisis, as it often is, with Stephen Doyle. He's a former Health Secretary. He's a former chair of the NHS Confederation as well, and joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Stephen.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. So look, we've got not only the usual pressures on the NHS heading into winter, we've also got the prospect that on Wednesday there's supposed to be a 5-day strike by resident doctors. Got a vote later on this afternoon. It's going to be, well, they've already had the vote. We're going to release the results of the BMA, whether or not they want to go ahead with it, given the pressures we've now got from this latest flu round, a super flu it's been called, which has hit Britain earlier in the season than it normally does. How worried should we be about what is going on right now?
Well, I think clearly anyone who's close to what's going on in the health service needs to be worried about the pressures that arise, as you say, every winter, and this year have arisen a bit earlier than usual because of the so-called super flu. Those are pressures that the health service deals with, and it clearly isn't made any easier if at the time of that epidemic, if that's what it technically is, it coincides with renewed dispute with doctors. But I also think that it's those who comment on the health service should try to avoid inflammatory language. And I've seen ministers, for example, talking about collapse of the health service, which I think is grossly overblown, frankly. What we need to do is win the argument with the resident doctors that they had a good deal last year, that, of course, their pay, like other people's pay, needs to progress, but you can't, the health service can't deliver a change in the pay of one group overnight without impacting on all the others.
No,
and
indeed.
I think that's an argument that the doctors well understand.
Well, this is it, the hyperbolic language. And, of course, the media are loving it as well. The mainstream media is like, oh, you know, I mean, those health correspondents, they lap it up. Oh, good, I'm back on the telly again, being all very important, saving the world with the collapse of the NHS. And, oh, shouldn't we all be wearing masks again and all of this? I mean, utter nonsense and claptrap. But the reality is, look, flu is a threat. Flu, different from COVID, actually, is a threat to younger people as well. It's a particular issue for children. And it's not to be taken like, I mean, I hate it when people say, I was off work last week. Oh, you got flu. No, I've had flu once, and I knew when I had flu. But, you know, I've had whatever the nasty bug is doing around, but it's not flu. But flu is a killer. I mean, I think it was 2018, we had something like 25,000 people died from flu, and again, of all ages that winter. It is a killer, and it does need to be taken seriously. But is the trouble going to be exacerbated by a doctor's strike? Because obviously the flu tends to hit a bit later. We know it's a particularly bad strain because we know that Australia tends to get that strain before us, and they had it hit them hard and it hit them early as well. The flu vaccine, they have to kind of take a little bit of a punt on which strain do we think is going to be the issue. It looks like they may have got the wrong strain for their flu vaccine this year, as sometimes happens. But you know, is it something we should be sort of, you know, in any way believing is to be out of the ordinary?
Well, I think it's a particularly intense version of the pressure that comes every year with at this time of year. But I wholeheartedly agree, actually. I don't always agree with you, Julia, but I do agree absolutely with what you just said.
You've got to be right sometimes.
Well, indeed. And you know, facts quite often are grey. They don't lend themselves to the kind of headlines that sell newspapers and even radio stations. And in the health service, every year, there's a pressure comes from flu and winter illnesses. This year the pressure is greater than is sometimes the case. All of that is true, but that is not the same thing as the health service being on the verge of collapse. It means the health service is under strain.
I do understand that the expertise of, doctors and nurses and everyone else is rather different from, say, people working in a supermarket or in hospitality. But why is it that so many industries are able to up their staffing and up the workload of people ahead of, say, the Christmas rush in hospitality or in retail, and yet the NHS seems to find it uniquely impossible to understand that, yes, when it's cold and when there are nastier bugs and people are indoors more people are going to get ill, and you're going to need more beds, more staff, and more people on duty. Why is the NHS uniquely unable to cope with this? Because it does appear that this isn't a thing in other countries. They don't have a routine crisis every time the temperature goes below a certain level.
Well, there's a whole series of issues there, isn't there, around rostering, around ensuring that I agree with you that the health service ought to be able to ensure that as demand rises, then there's more.
But shouldn't any hospital boss,
resources available?
Any hospital boss, any chief executive who cannot do that, surely isn't fit to do the job?
Well, and the majority of them is what I was going to go on to say. The majority of them do that, maybe imperfectly, maybe not as flexibly as we would like. Some hospitals do it better than others because the health service is a huge organisation. Some trusts are better than others. What we should be doing is focusing on which hospitals produce which outcomes. If you present at a hospital in one place, are you more likely or less likely to be seen quicker, to have the right treatment, or indeed better still, does the health system outside the hospital avoid you needing to go into hospital in the first place? Because so often social care, GP services, community services, when they're run properly, can actually relieve the load on hospitals. It isn't all
But again, none of this is beyond the wit of man. This is the thing that if one hospital area can do it, or one hospital do it, then so can everybody else. And if those people can't do it, these people are paid whopping great six-figure salaries. If they're not up to the job, they shouldn't be in the job. This ties in also with extraordinary stories in papers yesterday that that most NHS surgeons are operating just equivalent of 1 day a week because they turn up. Either the patients don't have, they haven't got the paperwork, they haven't got the operating theatre, they haven't got enough staff for the operating theatre. We're just looking at sort of abject chaos and incompetence at the heart of the NHS across the board. No wonder there's a waiting list problem. And people like, I've had like 3 relatives who've had to go private in the last year or two to get basic treatments, having paid in all their lives, substantial sums of tax, gone on the waiting list and gone, sold this, and they're in a very privileged position to be able to pay, but they shouldn't have to pay because they've already paid for the NHS, and yet the NHS can't organise itself. This is a problem. Come on.
Well, no, you're putting me in the position of suggesting that I disagree with you, which I emphasise I do not. There are good managers, there are good hospitals, there are hospitals that respond more effectively than others. And you're absolutely right that we should be able to compare the performance of one hospital in one area with other hospitals serving similar populations in other areas, and the people who deliver the less good outcomes should be held to account for those outcomes. That is how public accountability in a public health system should work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've just seen the BMA, the resident doctors have rejected the latest pay offer from the government, which I know also involved, dealing with, paying them back for some of their exam charges, but also greater job opportunities. And then they've got some really strong arguments on those fronts. So there's no point us paying to train up a load of doctors. They're not having jobs for them when we've got a shortage of doctors and we take them from abroad. So that makes sense. But it does look like the resident doctor strike is going to go ahead on Wednesday. Do you think that is the wrong or the right decision, Stephen?
Well, I think it's the wrong decision and I'm very disappointed by it. But I'm going to try to observe my own injunction not to use extreme language. I think it's extremely disappointing. I think the task for ministers now is to persuade the resident doctors. It's not about a battle with the BMA leadership. It's persuading resident doctors that it isn't reasonable, having had a 29% increase last year, to be increasing the pressure on the health service at this time of year. And a more reasonable response is to engage in a discussion with the government about the range of things they're interested in, including, as you rightly say, ensuring there are training places available for those or employed places for those who emerge from training.
Thank you very much, Stephen Dorrell, former Health Secretary and a former chair of NHS Confederation. Thank you for that. Sam Armstrong, bring you in. The Christmas doctor strike is going to go ahead on Wednesday. The government offer was rejected. This comes after NHS England said it was facing the worst case scenario after flu cases rose by more than 55% in a week. The union, the BMA, representing resident doctors, say that 83% of those who took part in a poll rejected the offer, and the turnout was a turnout of 65%. So they fulfilled all the expectations on that front. I'd say I find it quite extraordinary that the doctors are going ahead with this strike.
I think these people are a disgrace. They take an oath to do no harm, and then they go on, and this is their 14th walkout at a time when a lot of old people are in hospital with flu that with proper treatment can be more than easily managed. Yeah. As a result, they are going to die just before Christmas so that these people can have yet another inflation-busting pay rise.
We need to pay doctors more. I would say we need to pay doctors more. We can't get enough doctors. Let's pay doctors more. Look, that's how the market... Well, you're a free marketeer.
Well, I am a free marketeer, but these people are anything but. They demand that doctors aren't sent on to the best jobs on the basis of performance. They say very little about the cap on doctors getting trained because they quite like this monopolistic provision. The complete healthcare provision in this country has been taken over by unions who benefit nobody other than unions, and as a result, doctors in the UK are paid less than they would be if there was a freer market for it. They kill patients by going on strike all the time, and
we know patients will die.
Nothing ever works. I think these people. I think these. There is no limit to the powers I would use to stop this strike.
I think there's a perfectly legitimate argument. Again, the same. I feel, if you're in certain public services, we don't allow soldiers or police to go on strike. That actually there are some services that are so vital you don't get to go on strike. But then there have to be, pay review bodies that look at these look at these things sensibly, and then everyone has to agree. And if you don't like it, then you don't work for the NHS. That's how it's going to work. But then the free market's going to have to kick in. Maybe the problem's the NHS. I'm just throwing that out there. 12:51 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking about, again, another story we could have had a lot more time on if we didn't have that horrific terror attack on Bondi Beach yesterday, which is net zero. And the Tories, should they be elected, not looking likely at the current time on the polls, but who knows what's going to happen in the next few years. But the Tories pledging to basically scrap a load of the net zero car subsidies for electric cars. Oh, yes, and scrapping that idea for a ban on the sale of petrol cars. This is Talk.
and some of these tropes, these anti-Semitic tropes, which I think we'd all thought had gone away with the end of the Nazis in 1945, are suddenly there in large parts of our communities, and they need to be tackled head on. And we need to have actually people standing up to them right across the board and saying that this is wrong and what's being put forwards, and this sort of bastardised ideology is wrong, and this hatred is wrong. And I think it's really important that we recognise that across the board.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. This is Talk the Home of Common Sense. 12:54 is the time. Let's get to net zero. Or let's not get to net zero. That would be the ideal thing. We could just carry on being go back to being a wealthy country with plentiful and reliable and cheap energy. But no, we're not going to go that far. However, it is good news. Not only have Reform been leading the way on wanting to get rid of stupid net zero, but Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, has said she will scrap millions of pounds of net zero car subsidies if the Tories win the next election, and they will scrap the absurd ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel cars, and by the way, even hybrid cars, from 2030. Looks like the EU's planning to do the same. A voice of sanity, finally. Andrew Montford joins us. He's Director of Net Zero Watch. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Look, you and I have been saying this for a very long time. None of these policies survives any contact with reality whatsoever. And what a surprise, they don't. I mean, we're now going to have two major political parties going into the next election, saying, we're going to scrap this nonsense. How crucial, how significant is this?
This is extremely important for the motor manufacturing industry. If this policy doesn't get cancelled, then I think it is curtains for motor manufacturing in the UK. We have no technological advantage in EVs. The technological advantage there is all with the Americans and the Chinese. Yeah. Whereas Europe is very good at petrol and diesel cars. So we're essentially throwing away something we're good at and that people want in favour of something that we're not good at.
Yeah. And it is interesting.
People don't want.
The subsidies there have been for electric vehicles have been extraordinary. Up to 3, 4, 5 grand. They're still very expensive, but and then the whole your residence parking and your very big issue where I live, and any of your visitor permits or any visitor permits, that's all going to be much cheaper, lower tax, tick. What's not to like? And again, the public have gone, don't think I really want one, thanks. I'd rather buy a petrol or a diesel car. We know that the second-hand market in EVs is minuscule, and the government has actually had to resort to the extraordinary situation of fining car manufacturers for every petrol or diesel car they sell over and above a certain loud percentage. And the thing is, when we got rid of the horse and carriage and replaced it with petrol vehicles, they didn't have to fine the people selling those cars to force them to do it. People just moved because it was better technology. If this was better technology and it was cheap and reliable, people would use it, wouldn't it? People would be buying those cars, flocking to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it may be that in 20 years' time the battery cars are better.
Absolutely.
But, at the moment, they're not, because people genuinely don't want to buy them. And most of the EVs sold in this country are actually bought by fleets. Yeah. They're not bought by individual people on the streets. It's companies taking advantage of tax breaks and things.
Yes, and also rich people with a second car that's not necessarily a little runaround, not necessarily needed by the millions of people in this country who two-car households because they can't get anywhere without a car because there's no decent public transport where they live. But I know loads of people. They've got a good old gas guzzler, and then they've got their little virtue signalling car. Well, good on you for having the sort of spare cash to have a little runaround, eh?
Yeah. Absolutely. The thing we should say here, though, Julia, is that, of course, the Conservatives have said this, and Reform are saying the same kind of things. I don't know whether they've actually formally said that they're going to do this, but I'm sure they will. But of course, Ed Miliband is the guy who's in charge of this policy at the moment, and he ain't for turning at the moment.
And by the way, he could be Prime Minister come next May, because he's still the most popular choice of Labour Party members if and when Keir Starmer is ousted.
Yes, well then, yes, okay. Well, the last one out can switch the lights off, please. batteries, and if Ed Miliband hasn't switched them off
I was going to
already.
say, I don't think anyone's going to. His job is literally switching our lights off, Andrew. I mean, it is just an extraordinary thing, isn't it? But look, the key thing is these policies, as they become closer, whether it was policies on heat pumps or electric cars, all this, they gradually are falling by the wayside. Do you think this is the beginning of the end of net zero?
Yeah, it's clearly the beginning of the end. You can see this. The commentariat is starting to turn against it. People who've been saying that renewables are wonderful for decades are suddenly turning around and saying this is all has been a huge mistake. And of course, they just changed direction without actually apologising or anything.
No, exactly. And people like us who've been making these points, and you with rather more expertise than me, are just, we were bad people, but now we're just among the others. No, we were ahead of the curve on this one, because I know this is old-fashioned. We looked at the facts. Andrew Montford, Director of Net Zero Watch, thank you very much. He's been an absolute star on this issue. Sam Armstrong, you'd welcome this, I'm sure, that your party, you support the Conservatives.